All right, everybody. So we are starting our panel for today. When does flirting cross the line and become sexual harassment exactly? So we are going to be talking about essentially like the concept of flirting at the beginning of dating. What are people hoping to do? What are we trying to accomplish? Where are we trying to go to? What things kind of get to the point where we have gone too far a little bit? What things should people not be doing? How should we be educating the general public as far as what should or shouldn't be done? And what kinds of things should people do when the wrong things happen? I'm going to try to get everybody brought in here and we will get started. We're going to do some introductions. We will start at the bottom of our screen with Wick. Let me get back in. We'll see where everyone is.
Why? But maybe this will change your entire like stance on this, Doobie. Erudite just might have cracked this right open.
Do you like cheap abortions, I guess?
All right, everybody. I want to thank you guys all again for being here today. Again, I am some dummy online, or somebody online if you know me from Twitch. I've got some of my friends here. I'm relatively new to hosting panels. This is going to be my third panel that I put together. Today we are going to be talking about dating etiquette. We're going to be talking about flirting, when flirting crosses the line and becomes sexual harassment, which things are appropriate, which kind of things are not appropriate, and how people can generally tell. We want to talk about how the general public should know what is and what isn't appropriate. We should be trying to talk about like where these boundaries get drawn, what people should be doing when boundaries get crossed, and how people should know what to do in these situations, what's right and what is wrong. Again, I've got all of you folks here so that we can hopefully get a relatively diverse set of perspectives. I was hoping to get as wide of a variety of perspectives as possible, and I have gathered as a diverse a crowd as I possibly could assemble in the time. I'm going to let you guys each introduce yourselves one at a time. I do have one other individual, Tinkerbell, is supposed to be joining us shortly, and they have not made it yet, but once they do get here, we will be including them. But for now, Wick, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, who are you? Where are you at with all this?
This is first of all, thank you for the invite. I appreciate the opportunity to come on to the panel and to talk with you and to talk with all these lovely guests about this subject. I'm known as Wick. I run the Death of Certainty show at twitch.tv/Death of Certainty. You can find me there. When it comes to the interactions between people in various spaces, sexuality and flirting and things like that are a part of the human experience, right? For a lot of us. And because it's such a functional part of the human experience, for not everyone, but for a large portion of people, it can create a lot of tension. And especially in the modern sense, because we have a heightened sense of what is right and what is wrong. And we don't want to cross any boundaries. We're at a place in society where there are legitimate questions of what is appropriate and what is not. And so it's something that I just kind of want to explore. I don't have a real firm stance on this, but what I come down to as my kind of guiding principle here is it's all about what the recipient feels in the situation. If they feel it is flirting versus harassment, then okay. But if they feel it's harassment, then it's something you shouldn't do.
Hey, guy,
and that can be hard to parse. But that's
Chick-fil-A flirted with me today, and I was interested. Very interesting. Very interesting. Again, Wick, thank you very much for being here. Tink, since you came in a little bit late, you missed the opening discussion of my thing. I'm going to come back to you toward the end, but start us if you want to go ahead.
Sure. Like Wick said, yeah, flirting, I guess, is a very normal part of the human experience, and in any workplace or any like school place or places where you interact with people on a regular basis, you run into, you know, a likelihood of having interactions like that. So I think it's just important to communicate clearly in these situations, and communicate like very clearly when you're uncomfortable, and also just be aware of like other people's like if somebody is like not super enthusiastic, just, you know, learn to be aware of things like that. But yeah, that's it.
Very good, very good. Again, Stardust, thank you so much for joining us today. Fantastic to have you. Rhizome.
Yeah, hey, so I'm Rhizome. Recently left the Leftoid Phantom Zone, the miasma that is the graveyard of leftist Twitch, and coming up on my own. I would say it's kind of easy to say the line is where somebody gets uncomfortable. I think it's harder to think about what that entails or what pushes somebody over the line of comfortability. I think questions like this are interesting because we can't really remove things from a social context or from context when we're discussing this sort of thing. And I don't think we can imagine all context in order to be able to figure out where the line is. So I'm just interested in hearing people's arguments.
Awesome, awesome. Well, hopefully it's a good discussion. And again, thank you for joining us today. Fantastic to meet you. Erudite.
I basically think flirting is anything that's kind of fun, back and forth, and builds and creates sexual tension. I think sexual harassment is when basically a behavior is both unwanted and inappropriate, and I'm pretty firm that it needs to be both of those things before I'm comfortable calling it sexual harassment. I don't like using just how people feel about things, but hopefully someone will ask me about that because I don't want to be too long, so I'll just end there.
Wonderful. Well, again, thank you for joining us. Katie?
Yeah. I'm actually with and more with Erudite than with other people. So I think that the line is not how a person feels. How a person feels is important, but like the problem is that we can't mind read. So there's like an extra step that needs to happen when flirting actually becomes sexual harassment. And that's the part where you actually inform the person that is trying to flirt with you that you're uncomfortable. Now there are certain like thresholds, and I'm sure we'll get into the discussion in terms of like there are passive ways of trying to inform and there are more direct ways. And I'm obviously going to like very much stand for the direct approaches, because that way you can, for me personally, I know from my own experiences, like once I've directly communicated it, I can beat myself up less about like, oh, maybe they don't know and stuff like that. Once I've been very clear I'm not interested, and then the person continues to do that, it's very easy to say this person is now being inappropriate. Where before they could have just been clueless or ignorance, you know, like that saying of don't attribute to malice what you can attribute to ignorance, something like that. And I think with stuff like complex, nuanced social interactions, that's a good place to caution, to do that.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, I like it. Again, thank you, Katie, for being here. Real pleasure having you. Doobie.
I think for me, it becomes sexual harassment the moment that like somebody's let you know that they're not interested, or you've let that person know that you're not interested, and it continues, right? And after that happens a couple times, and yeah, I'm comfortable saying they're harassing you. But I think where that line is for most people depends very heavily on how attractive the person doing the harassing is. I.e., I think somebody can get away with a lot more in my DMs than Wick can. But you know, I think it's just heavily contextual.
Again, I really appreciate you being here, Doobie. Thank you very much. Tinkerbell.
Hi. So I think it's kind of a game between three different things. It would be politeness, honesty, and clarity. So when we're playing with the ideas of flirting versus harassment, what we're trying to understand is, okay, so based on what you understand is politeness in this case. So that'll be kind of like the ways that we would flirt. The clarity in this case is, okay, am I understanding your honest intentions in this case versus this dance that we're playing? So at the point where one party is incorrect about the other one without things expressly being talked about, that's the point at which flirting becomes sexual harassment. But the person who is being harassed needs to tell the person who is doing the harassing, because unless you're expressly telling them, they won't know.
Perfect. And again, thank you guys, well, especially you for being here, especially on such short notice and for making it. Thank you guys all for being here and joining us in this. This is going to be an interesting conversation, I think. I want to break it up into a couple little different sections. Kind of for the first part of it, I want to suss out where we draw the lines in between platonic casual conversation, and then this has become flirting, and then where do we get into sexual harassment, and then we can get into sort of the prescriptive societal aspects of it later. But I kind of want to kick it out open there. We'll just throw the football in the middle, and whoever wants to start, we can.
So I guess on that note, Erudite made a statement in her opening that I find very interesting, and I'm curious as what she has to say about it. When we talk about, like, when does something become flirting, right? I think that they're, like, at the end of the day, it's hard for me to say that someone's feelings on that would not play a role or would not matter in that case. So if I felt what somebody was doing to me was flirting, why would that not matter?
I am very silent.
Is that a misread of your statement, Erudite, or?
A little bit, because it was about sexual harassment, right?
Okay.
How you feel about flirting. Like, to be honest, I think flirting is like so morally neutral. Like,
Fair.
how you feel about it is probably going to indicate whether you flirt back or whether you indicate that you're not interested. It was specifically feelings around sexual harassment feel like a really bad line, because I know a ton of people who don't like getting compliments, but that doesn't make compliments a sexual harassment, right? That's why I don't think feelings is a good line. That's why I'm specific by saying it's both unwanted and it's inappropriate, right? So unwanted obviously needs to be communicated in some way. I'm not actually going to be firm about explicit. I think you can strongly implicitly imply it as well. Although if you suspect, for example, that somebody's like potentially like neurodivergent and isn't picking it up, it's probably worth making it explicit. Inappropriate would be, there's a bunch of things. But for example, if somebody says, I'm not really comfortable with this, please like stop flirting with me, and then you continue, I'd be like, yeah, now you're in harassment territory. So that's not really answering the question. That's more the line between flirting and harassment. But
I assumed it applied to both, and that was incorrect in my case. When it comes to flirting specifically, and when it changes from a platonic thing to a flirting thing, I think that has a large part to do on the intention of the person doing the thing. Like, I can give a compliment to Stardust, for example, and have it not be a flirty comment, right? Like, but if she takes that as flirty, does it become flirty? I don't know. Like, where do you think?
I almost wonder even, like, there's kind of sometimes platonic flirting, right? Where, you know, like, this person and the other person don't have any, like, romantic or sexual feelings towards each other, but they just kind of flirt in, like, a very, like, in a, like, I guess like a very playful but like friendly way, but everybody knows that like there's no feelings one way or the other, I guess. I don't know. I almost wonder where that line happens as well. And if any of you have like experienced that kind of thing.
Yes, but at the same time, I've had people where I've assumed it was casual flirting or for lack of a better term, friendly flirting without any particular meaning behind it, but have later found out that that was not the case, and they had intended much more serious kind of. It was as a feeler, I guess. You suss it out by being friendly at first, and then they were like, if I responded to it, they would have pushed forward. So I think that it's at least for me sometimes hard to tell the difference, right? So for example, if I told you
on that.
Oh, sorry, go on.
No, sorry. I'll go after you. Don't worry.
No, I was just given a bunch of subs to flirt with everyone on the panel, so I'm going to do that.
I want to normalize flirting. I want to flirt with everyone all the time. And I think sexual tension between two people who don't even plan to fuck is totally fine. Just because there's sexual tension doesn't mean that you have to imply that you're going to fuck. Doesn't mean you have to fuck. You don't even have to kiss. You can just flirt. It's fun.
Yeah,
Does anyone
I was
have an
actually
issue with Erudite's definition or with Erudite's lines of being unwanted and inappropriate? Because so far, I feel like those are the most concrete statements we've had on it.
I don't disagree.
I think I agree with them. Yeah, I think I agree with those lines.
So I guess the question then comes down to like, how do we gauge it, or like what the metrics are, like when we determine like whether it's unwanted or inappropriate, and whether or not people need certain knowledge of it on either side.
And I think it has to be both. I'm going to be clear, like my definition, at least, I'm staunch that it has to be both before it's sexual harassment.
I would agree.
I would agree.
So, yeah, if there's not that clarity where you've expressly defined the lines and it's just this navigation of some sort of game, which I'm calling that game politeness, essentially what we're trying to suss out is are the things that you like and the things that you know and the things that you're a part of that affect the way that you're going to engage, like with what kind of humor you like, your interests, and how we can play on these two things in a way that we understand each other. So within this sort of game that we're playing, we're not expressly saying these things. What we're doing is testing each other to test and see if you get what I'm saying. It's essentially a game of, do you get it, right? And if you were not talking about these things clearly and it's just this game, it can't really be harassment because someone hasn't broken that game and said, you know what, this is actually what is, we're not just testing this anymore.
Do you
right?
think, yeah, do you think though that, this is to you and Erudite and to the whole panel, do you think that there is an action or a type of flirting that would automatically jump the levels to harassment? Like, because I can imagine certain things, like if I slap a coworker on the ass, you know, like, you know, even without them telling me they don't want that, I would still consider that inappropriate at the very least, right?
I think if you walk up to most people and out of the blue just say, I want to lick you all up and down and I want to suck your nipples until they bleed, that would probably be unwelcome and inappropriate in all cases.
Is that flirting though?
I
feel like that's-
Some people might
that
think
could
it's
be their
flirting.
kink. Yeah. So I think like socially, if you break a sexual taboo, like generally we don't approach people we've never met and offer to like lick their nipples. I would say that that's both presumably unwanted and it's
Those
inappropriate.
nipples have to
it's-
bleed, Erudite. Don't forget.
Yeah, because it's breaking a social taboo, right? Like, I'm sure I have lots in my DMs of random people breaking social taboo, and you're like, "Whoa, like this is weird."
But that's where this politeness comes in, right? Because we don't know each other's standards in this case. So we're appealing to some norm that we've all agreed on, which is that, okay, it is inappropriate, right? It's this politeness. It's inappropriate to grab someone's ass or lick their nipples. That isn't necessarily the case. It's when we're defining these things. So we've culturally, those seem to be pretty clear lines, right? It's in the ambiguous lines that we're kind of talking about where there's not this clear distinction. That's why we're playing a game, essentially. And so it's only when you clearly define those, and that's with express dictation of, I am uncomfortable, stop, that you're actually establishing at that point. If you continue, if you're essentially breaking what you've now established, that's when it becomes harassment.
So, Tink, do you then think that if someone like DM'd you and they said that they wanted to suck your nipples until they bleed, do you think that would be like a reasonable level of flirting if it's the first DM you get from someone, just a random person?
That's the thing. So it's going to be different for most people. It seems pretty consistent with that. For me, I would laugh. Like, I would laugh.
I would
tell
laugh
everyone.
too, but the question is that really flirting at that point? Because what I'm thinking about flirting in the context of what we're talking right now is there's a certain utility. It's like flirting usually builds, and it could stop building at some point and just stop at a certain cutoff, but usually people start very slow. They don't start with like sucking someone's nipple till they bleed, right? It goes through like a continuum because it's checking boundaries and checking like people's comfort levels, I guess. So
Yes.
I guess what I'm asking is that, like, because in my opening statement, I said that there are certain thresholds where, sure, that might be acceptable as flirting, but it can't be acceptable as like the beginning of flirting or stuff like that. I don't know, there just seems to be like a level of I wouldn't say inappropriateness, but I do think you can come off too strong with your flirting to the point where to call it flirting is a bit disingenuous. You know what I mean? Like
I would say we could call
to
it
be
flirting, but it's risky flirting, right? So
Yes.
like what I would say to that individual is being like, you probably have a 99% chance that this will be perceived as sexual harassment, and that person is fully within their rights to, because they'll probably feel it's unwanted and you're breaking a lot of social taboos, so it's inappropriate. Now they might luck out with 1% and
For
the
sure.
person they DM who's like, they might DM and be like, man, I really just want to smell your butt sweat. And the person like sees that and they're like, oh my gosh, I just want somebody to smell my butt sweat, you know? Good. And then it is flirting, right? And this is why we have to do this line of like, you know, this is why I don't want to just say like these behaviors are objectively sexual harassment, because sometimes it goes over well. I just want to tell people your risk of being assumed to be sexually harassing is much higher, and that person is fully within their right. So
Didn't that happen to you?
I think
Aaron?
that's what I
Didn't
meant.
that
Yeah,
happen
that's
to you?
literally-
Somebody
I'm
said,
literally
like, after
quoting
you
one of
work
my-
out, I
Jello.
imagine that ass
Jello.
smells
Dr.
dank as
Jello.
shit or some shit.
Realize you were a cat.
But that's the thing. So we're talking about defining like the start and an end of this really broad category that is flirting,
Yes.
right? Because we're acknowledging that there are different levels to the severity with which you can flirt, and it can still be considered flirting. But I agree, we typically start small. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to start small. But in order to encourage those behaviors and to suss it out in a way that is less dangerous, less abrupt, then it's better to start slowly and do it incrementally.
Yeah, so I'd like to just make it clear. That's like, I'm not saying, hey, if you just come to a random person and tell them you want to suck their nipples till they're bloody, that can't be flirting. That wasn't what I was saying. It's just like, as Erudite said, there's a 99% chance that's not going to go over well, and that's like completely reasonable, and most people understand that. So it's like, yeah, I think so I'm not condemning any way that people want to try to flirt. I'm just more talking about the utility aspect of flirting. That's like, if you want to be a successful flirt, you're just going to have to try that on a lot of people until you hit that one guy or girl or non-binary who are super down for that right off the gate.
When it comes to like to not just social norms though, when it comes to things like interactions in places like a setting like school or like a workplace or things like that, I think that there is value in certain things being considered sexual harassment that are more than just more than just someone has told you not to do this, right? Like, because I don't want to give everyone a free pass to just slap each other on the ass, and if they do it once, it's not sexual harassment, but if they do it twice, then it is, right? Like,
that's not what I'm saying though, Wick. Everyone's saying like the reality is that like the likelihood that if you go up to a random person and slap them on the ass that they might choose to press charges and call it sexual harassment is pretty high, and you're fully culpable for that responsibility. So it's a pretty bad idea. It's not really within our social norms right now to do that. So if somebody wants to call that sexual harassment, if the person who it happened to is like, yeah, I was sexually harassed, I'd be like, yep, absolutely, because it was both unwanted and inappropriate. It broke social norms.
I'd also argue that like slapping someone on the ass is not probably the best example. I think the bloody nipples is a much better one to use, because I think it would be inappropriate in a work setting, like pretty much off the gate. It's just that like with the slapping someone on the ass, there's like the element of like now you're violating someone's like personal space, and there's a physicality.
Well, slapping somebody in the
Yes.
ass who you don't know is very different than like my husband slapping me in the ass who I've been married to for like 4 years, right? Very different thing. I'm probably not going to press charges on Nick for slapping me in the ass, right? And so a large part of flirting comes down in large part to report, which is why Tink's right. Like best practice for like good flirting gives the most agency to the person you're flirting with so that they can say no as gently and as like most socially comfortably as possible, and then slowly increasing the sexual tension if it seems reciprocated, and just like giving them safe outs if they're not into it. I think that's best practice for flirting.
Have you guys ever
I think that
had,
it is. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, no, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I think that what you said, Wick, that is really important. So in specific settings, we do need to set boundaries for this that are like hard lines, because they could potentially affect the flow of, like, for example, in a school, especially considering there are children around, we need to be very clear and lean on the side of like caution over anything. So in these cases, and like example, like in the workplace as well, where we don't necessarily, we need to set like some baseline of, okay, these are the standards that are set, because the more clarity that we have for these like boundaries that we're setting, the easier it is to communicate and flirt this line, right? It's much easier to suss out whether you are compatible with someone when you kind of know what they're into and what they like, right? So it's a similar principle. We can like define, okay, these are okay to do, and then these things are not okay to do. So it's up till this line, and then flirting stops at this line, right? So that's really, really useful to have, but in settings that are open. So like where you are not responsible by like some contract, right? So like some contract with like either a business or law. So let's say like you're at a bar, you're technically still under the law in this case, but that's not being directly enforced on you at that very moment. So you're still beholden to it, but the like lines that we're setting are much farther in terms of what we're able to do in an open bar than they are like in a workplace when we've set an exact like here is the line, right?
I think that there is a distinction between, because I wouldn't necessarily even calling someone like slapping a stranger in the ass like flirting. So when we're talking about flirting and we're grouping like verbal flirting versus like physical flirting, or and there are thresholds there too. So it's like it all being grouped into this one big thing, like calling someone pretty and like asking them to suck on your nipples till they bleed, or the reverse, and like slapping someone on the ass are all very different types of like escalation of flirting, and I think, I don't know, it seems a bit not super productive for us. Maybe we should get more specific, is what I'm suggesting, if you don't mind.
Like demoing flirting, or
do you want me to flirt with you?
Do you want to
the right way and the wrong way? We could do this
Sure.
maybe right now.
I love flirting with people.
Okay.
Yeah, me too. Actually,
Erudite, can I buy your underwear? How much are you selling your underwear for?
Right, so I'd be like, hey, Stardust, I'm kind of uncomfortable with that. No thanks.
Well, can we start with who unironically got turned on by the idea of somebody licking your nipples till they bleed?
See, I thought that was good. That was good. Actually,
Katie's like, I'm into it.
No. I just thought the question was interesting for sexual tension. Okay. Because it's like, it implies interest, right? And I like that. Starda, there was something that you asked at the beginning about like the difference between flirting that wants to lead to somewhere more versus flirting that stays friendly. And then Wick touched on that a little bit. And like, I think that's something that I don't want to generalize it to women. I know I personally, when guys flirt with me, I tend to assume it's meant to check further than that. So if I flirt back, that would send the message that it's going, that I'm up for it to continuing, when I wouldn't mind like the friendly flirting, but I'm not necessarily signing up for like sexting or like doing stuff in like 2 weeks if we continue this. And I guess I wonder how it distributes on like gender lines. We can,
yeah,
like,
I tend to. I think it's a hard one, because it's hard to determine one like when that flirting is like actually serious, somebody wants to like move forward with that, or when it's just like I don't know, like your work husband or whatever, like complimenting you and it's not going to go anywhere, right? So it's really hard to determine, and also like a lot of the time, like Wick was saying, there's like the very real like issue where one person thinks it's going to go somewhere and the other person has no intention of taking it somewhere, right? And so that's like that's something I thought that would be interesting to talk about. Like, should we just like not do that type of flirting at all? Like, how do we tell when it's going to go somewhere? How do we?
The way I solve it is that I just set those expectations. Like usually, and when I start talking to someone and I feel like we're flirting, I would just call it out, and I'll be like, it's kind of weird that we're flirting right now. And then it gives them the ability to, like, if they don't feel like we're flirting and I was the only one on board with that, they'll probably say something, and then I'll be like, okay, I got the wrong message. Sorry about that. Or sometimes if I flirt and I feel like I'm getting like passive messages and I don't know if that's just their way of flirting, I'll be like, hey, I feel like I'm making you uncomfortable. Not really sure if I'm doing that or not. So if you just can like let me know if you're okay with what's happening or not. And I also feel like women don't really do that a lot.
Me.
Women get
to
a
see
lot
you,
of
my friend.
passes in terms of how far they can take flirting. And I think guys aren't really encouraged to like explore how comfortable or uncomfortable they are with certain like suggestive statements and stuff like that. So I think that's also like an element of flirting that is not really talked about a lot. Like even in the prompt of the conversation, we were like talking about when men flirt inappropriately, but I think women can have a tendency to do that too.
As somebody who's had a lot of queer friends, like I've been in circles where I get like unwanted advances and stuff like that, and it's just a simple conversation of like, hey, I'm not into that or whatever, but like I felt that, you know.
But my question is like, where do you determine where? First off, should we just not do that type of flirting where it's like purely platonic and it just stays platonic, or is there a way that you? Well, is there a way that you are able to tell specifically if somebody is not really trying to take it anywhere after that, or like what is like? I don't know if you understand my question really.
Oh,
like,
I thought I answered it. I
so
think
you just
that
like outright like call it out in front of them and stuff, and
I would have I would like if I feel like there's like friendly flirting, and it's usually going to be with a guy. And eventually I might be like, I wonder if I'm sending a message that this is going somewhere that I'm not. I'll like talk about it, and it doesn't have to be super explicit. It just be like, I'm just having fun, right? And for me, that's good enough to set the expectations, and it works. Like guys generally seem to be on board with that. I'm more just pro like and I struggle to directly communicate, but I support that a lot because I just think like it's a lot easier than mind reading, and flirting is so complicated, So if you can afford to be direct about it, I just feel like,
I think I generally like personally, like I don't know, because I don't I think I generally just kind of stay away from flirting, and maybe that's just like a weird thing that I do, but like it's not like I mind it really, but
Stardust just comes up and goes, I want to fuck now.
For the most part, I kind of like just stay away from it because I feel like there's so much like room for misinterpretation and
yeah. But I think that's a very common thing that happens to women. Again, from this perspective of like you're kind of worried that if you flirt, then it's not going to stay friendly and they're going to get the wrong impression. So it's just like, this is too complicated. I'm just not going to flirt. That's what happens to me a lot. Like if I'm in a relationship or seeing someone, and then if I just want to friendly flirt with someone else, I'm like, oh, this is going to get complicated. Better just like not do it at all, right? And I think there's a way to like normalize flirting, as Erudite says. Like she wants to normalize flirting, make it more casual, and I agree with that.
Yeah. Honestly, what Rhizome said is like not too far from like what my strategy used to be when I used to like date, like it would just be like, all right, like I think this person's attractive, like, hey, want to hang out later? And like it, obviously like the implication is there if we're hanging out at night, like, yeah. So, but I don't know.
Fuck now.
That wouldn't work for me.
I want to address maybe the there's this interesting thing like normalizing flirting. I think we have a difficulty in society kind of on 3 separate levels. So men have kind of this rock and a hard place where they're both told to be the pursuers. They're told to like initiate and pursue, pursue the relationship. And then they're also told that if you pursue too hard, you're kind of a predator. And there's lots of like predator language around men. On the flip side, we regularly seem to tell women specifically that they are the gatekeepers, they are to be pursued. And we also seem to like socialize women to not be comfortable, like just kind of communicating what their boundaries are. ideally implicitly first through like body language or just like avoiding a conversation, and then necessarily moving to explicit. I think we don't teach the women the next step to explicit when it's necessary. And it's just frustrating. Like, I want women, like, I don't know what the solution is at this point. I think like so many men are so like nervous about flirting that I think like probably the best solution is to start normalizing women initiating more in the first place, which I don't think is like better or worse. I just think it's like the reality of where we're at right now.
Yeah, I also think women aren't encouraged to boundaries are obvious that I think women are generally less socialized to be comfortable expressing those explicitly. But I think what's much worse is that I think a lot of women would want to flirt more or would want to like escalate the flirting, and we're kind of not really no, it hasn't been very normalized. I think it is more now. But it is something that I personally like pushing. Like, I'm a very flirty person, and I think a lot of, like, I'm thinking about even what Stardust was saying. It's like, sorry, I don't know if you're a flirty person or not, and you're just like denying yourself, right? So there's also like the difference there. Because from what you said, for example, I'd never be, if there's no flirting and there wasn't like a fun back and forth for me, I'm not going to be like, hey, let's hang out at my place. Like, I need the flirting. Like, I need that buildup. Like, I'm not going to have a lot of interest just because the guy is hot. Like, I also need to find them interesting, and flirting is part of how I find them interesting. Like, there's a lot of humor that comes out in flirting that like I check and I like, and stuff like that. So I think it's very personal. I think some people really like flirting and some people not so much. But I think a lot of women could like flirting, but they're just discouraged from doing so for a host of reasons.
Yeah, one of those is like the typical, like, you're seen as like an easy person if you're like too flirty with people. Or like there's I don't know, there's just like those implications, like I don't know, if you get into like into an uncomfortable situation, if you were like friendly with somebody beforehand, well, it's kind of your fault for being friendly with them, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of like the attitude. And it's probably like I feel like it's kind of like manifested in a way where like I just kind of like am straight to the point now, where like I avoid generally most of these like types of situations, and maybe I would like being in more of them, but like just because I'm afraid of like of like taking the blame, like if I'm like in a situation that I'm like very clearly not consenting in, that I think that partly like I just kind of avoid these situations now,
Yeah, so I can give you an example. Like, sometimes there are people that I know, or they might have told me they have like a crush on me or something like that. And I don't mind continuing to flirt, but it's like, once I've made it very clear, like, it's not going anywhere for me. And it's like, I'll just be very straightforward. It's like, it's super cute that you have this crush. It's like, if you want to continue flirting, I'm all up for it. But you should know that it probably doesn't mean to me what you might interpret that it means to me. And I'm just like straightforward about it. But when I do that, I do take a very big risk that people would say that I have been leading someone on, because like, well, that they have a crush and you continue to flirt with them. And for me, that's why I really prefer like that direct communication, because it lets me, like, it's fine if public opinion like doesn't agree with me, but if I've been very explicit that things aren't going anywhere for me and it's just fun for me, and then a guy refuses to like compute that into their head, that's not really on me anymore, because I was very direct. But some people disagree with that, so it just really depends.
I think a common theme that we're hearing today is just direct communication, right? Like, flirting can be fun. It's like a game, like Tinkerbell was saying here. But at a certain point, at least personally for me, I become direct. I stop beating around the bush, so to speak, pun intended, and I just get like straight to the point, right? If I'm actually interested, I'm like, okay, hey, yeah, this is fun. We're having a good time. Do you want to take things further? And they can say yes or no at that point. I make it very direct and very clear. I think best practice, at least for me, has been to be direct at a certain point. Like, you can tease, you can be fun and flirty up to a point, but at a certain point, you just have to ask directly.
Can I be a little bit spicy and pose the panel a question? Because I think it's worth actually answering. I'm asking the host though. It's gonna be a little spicy.
Erudite, you know how to Twitch stream. Don't be too spicy now. But what you got to say?
I'm gonna ask a question, and I think some people are gonna take it in some kind of way, and I'm not meaning that. But how many on the panel actually feel like they're pretty good at flirting? They've flirted a lot, and it's something that they enjoy. Because I think like there's a very difference in opinion for people who like don't have much experience with it versus people who like do it a lot. And I'm not even trying to ask that in like a denigrating way. It's just like there's no research on this. The best we have is like people's experience.
I'm pretty
let's,
mid.
Let's do like a kind of a thumbs up, thumbs down, or don't put your hand up at all if you don't want to say, because I don't care if you don't want to say. Doobie, I don't know how to get you to involve with that particular thing, so you could just talk. Oh yeah, I forgot you've got that.
Is that flirting? When Doobie?
What's
Yeah,
the question? Are we good at? If the question, are we?
Do you feel like you're good at flirting, and like if people came to you, give you game, would you be able to give it?
Or do you not want to tell us? Or
I
are
think
you
that I'm
a rhizome
actually.
at it?
Yeah.
I'm gonna be my best advocate.
Oh.
I'm saying.
Is that what we're doing?
Why I'm asking is everyone who's saying like explicit all the time makes me feel like they haven't flirted a lot, because almost all of flirting is pretty implicit in what's going on, right? So for example, if I was flirting with Tink, I'd probably start by being like, hey, like, I really like that necklace, right? Super easy opening. She can take it platonically if she chooses to. It's the easiest no, but if she responds well by being like, thanks, right? I can like step it up and start a conversation, right? And the whole time we're having the conversation, while we're chatting, I'm probably gonna give her little smiles, little glances. All of this is implicit. All of it, right? You're not going to get explicit typically in flirting for a long time, probably weeks potentially, if you're like actually like really pursuing somebody. And so when people are like talking about these explicit things, I guess I just want like, I don't want viewers to be like, yeah, flirting's just explicit. And it's like, it's really not. There's a pretty big difference between like,
Yeah.
I think
the
that.
reason
Wait. So I
The
would say
reason I
that
say
none
mid
of flirting
is
is actually explicit. So we can talk about specific actions, but if actions aren't taken, it's actually the action that we're talking about, which would be like the point where it becomes sexual harassment, right?
Mhm.
So
That needs to
in
be
this
explicit,
case, it is expressly a game. So like we're trying to suss out this thing, right? So when we're thinking about someone as potentially like a relationship partner or a sexual partner, we're doing like a cost benefit analysis of risk versus reward, right? And the way that we're doing that is by testing compatibility, right? And then also interest. So that person has to be both interested and compatible with you, right? Because at that point, that's where the potential reward is greater than the risk of being forward. So if I think after we've talked for a while, the escalation point is, okay, I'm going to continue this and take a step forwards if I think that we are so compatible and I have such a high interest that I think that it is worth the potential like backlash. If this case it goes from platonic to romantic, I'm willing to risk that because of the potential, right? So this is actually sort of like a vehicle for us to move forwards in a relationship based on the trust as we've been testing each other back and forth for that compatibility and interest.
I disagree. I'll tell you why real quickly. Is I think that people have different goals with flirting, right? Like I think for some, yes, that's entirely the case. Is they use it as a vehicle to discover if there's compatibility in the relationship and they want to move forward. But some people just do it because they're bored. Some people just do it because it's fun for them, right? And I think that when we ask this question, are you good at flirting even? Like, it's hard to even answer that because whether I consider myself good or not depends on like, am I accomplishing my goals or am I not? And
listen, Erudite's completely correct in her assessment where people who are saying they're more explicit have less experience. Flirting is an elegant, like implicit thing. And the cases where I'm more explicit are when I'm less comfortable bringing it to that level, but I'm starting to feel something. Maybe I've known somebody for a bit. We have rapport. And I'm like, okay, this is kind of starting to turn into something. It's hard for me to switch that dynamic. If I meet somebody and right away I'm like, all right, I'm pretty into you. Like, it's easier for me to get into that flirt mode immediately and just like make that a part of the dynamic. But if I'm like, all right, I know you in another context and now I'm starting to get to know you better, that's when it's difficult for me to shift gears, and I have to be, or I just tend to be more explicit because I don't know how to elegantly do it as well.
So,
So
and that's the thing in
Well, I
itself,
think-
right, Wick? So, like, the two goals are sussing out compatibility and interest in themselves. Those are the goals of flirting, right? So, you don't necessarily have to escalate things in order to accomplish those two goals. You accomplish the goal of flirting in the act of flirting, right? Because you're figuring out when I say something, when I send a signal, right? Did they get my signal and understand it? And I can tell if they did by a reciprocal response, right?
But see,
And then it's the issue of clarity, whether
But-
I understand if they understood or not.
But this implies that everyone's goal is that, and that they're implicitly or explicitly seeking out that goal. And I would say that I would argue, at least, that if I'm just bored and I want to be nice to you and I want to, like, quote unquote flirt with you, and have no intention, like, even if we hit it off super well, I have no intention of moving it in any direction towards
Shelley, good to see
actual
you.
romantic or anything like that. I think I would still consider I would still consider it flirting.
Mhm.
And two, I would say that the goal in that case is not to establish compatibility or establish that kind of level of interest. It's simply to either make you feel good or
But it
entertain
is.
myself
Your
or whatnot.
compatibility is negative because if one person wants to pursue a relationship and the other person wants to just have fun, then you're not compatible. Both people might be flirting just to have fun, and you kind of figure that out as you're talking, right? There's plenty of people that I talk to that we just flirt back and forth all the time, and it's pretty abundantly clear to both of us that it's never going anywhere, right? There's other people where it seems like it's escalating, and there comes a point in time where, like, you have to either implicitly or explicitly be like, hey, just so you know, seems like our goals are a little bit misaligned, right? Which is like sucks and a little bit awkward, but like it's not like this negative or like immoral thing, which I'm not saying that you're saying it's immoral. I'm just making it
To
clear.
be honest, I want to see
Compatibility
people
isn't
entertain
also-
Erudite's
Go.
question and explain why they gave the answers that they did, as opposed to just moving back to the abstract, because I think that will like help us understand like I don't know. I like the idea of like, do you guys agree that if you're more explicit, you might have less experience, might be able to like
I
read social
disagree.
cues less. So then, yeah. So
Yeah.
explain.
Yeah.
So
I
explain your
completely
take.
disagree.
I disagree because I think part of it also just being explicit is like it honestly, like, sometimes that's like a time saving thing, you know, like but also I think
Then we
that
get to a whole like, when is it flirting and just like a straight up like proposal, like, you know what I mean?
yeah, well, I mean, like, if I'm saying to somebody, like, I'm not being explicit, like, when I, like, hey, wanna fuck, right? Like, that's not ever, like, as explicit as I go. Usually for me, when I'm talking to somebody, it'll be like, hey, you wanna hang out? Like, and, you know, like, hang out later or something, and then it's just more of, like, accelerated flirting, I think, more than, like,
So-
like explicit, right? Like, it's like there's an accelerated, it's kind of like an accelerated once you've made it clear, I guess. But I mean, I think I also kind of just I used to kind of like interact with people more like in that flirty way, but like I think I just kind of stay away from it now because I think people are too quick to like misinterpret, you know, or even not even flirty, like just being friendly with people. People will misinterpret friendliness as flirting, and then they'll like take that as an invitation to go farther with you before like you've even like thought of that in that way, right? So I guess I just kind of go for like accelerated flirting, I guess. I don't
Speed
know.
running. It's called speed running, and it's a sign of skill.
So I want to hear from Doobie. He had his hand up. I'd also like to hear from Katie. Another word that I want to throw out, or concept that I want to throw out, that I'd like to hear everybody engage with, is this thing I've heard of a long time ago called a friend zone, and this concept of separating romantic partners from like platonic friend individuals, and see if anybody has any thought on this general subject. But Doobie, what were you going to say? We'll engage with that later.
Yeah, so I guess I just mostly agree with the idea that we should normalize normalize flirting initiated by women. It's not like unheard of, right? Like I'm somebody who gets hit on a lot, but I think that's something that comes along with the sexual gatekeeper title for a lot of women is the feeling that they're squatting at the top of a hill, right? And once they've decided to open those gracie gates for a man, he should feel blessed to slip between them, right? And if he doesn't, there's something wrong with him, right? And I think it leads a lot of women to place like unrealistic value on sexual contact with them. And like I said, I'm somebody who gets hit on a lot in the real world and on the internet. And it's been my experience that women are fucking terrible at taking rejection. And that when they overreact,
Thank you for being
people
here.
take the behavior of a
fan.
rejected woman much less seriously than they take the behavior of a rejected man. Whether it's like, repeated phone calls, harassing you on like in person or on the internet. I've had women fucking lean into my car and show me their boobs because I said no and just wouldn't leave me the fuck alone, right? Like, and people will laugh that off, right? In fact, if you have guy friends, they're probably going to ask you if you're gay or something for turning this down, right? And so yeah, I think that encouraging women to flirt more would also normalize like sexual rejection in women, and I think learning to take rejection is pretty important in this dynamic.
Yeah, I think that's true.
So yeah, that was all I wanted to say.
Thank you.
I think that it's really odd that earlier on we talked about different types of flirting and how different people are going to have different modes of flirting, and now we're just saying that like being more explicit is somehow an indicator of like lack of experience. Where I think it's more just like type of flirting. I also think that there's like a misunderstanding about what being explicit is, and just because and that, for example, my flirting is very meta. I like talking about what I think about the other person, what they think about me, and back and forth. And that's the type of flirting that I do. I enjoy that a lot. It's absolutely flirting. It's very, very direct. I like direct communication. So I wouldn't say that's lack of experience. I don't know if I'm a good flirter. I know I flirt a lot. Whether it's successful or not, that's going to have to be like the people that I flirt with would have to say. But I don't think like a level.
Yeah, I actually agree.
If earlier on we said that someone can like DM you out of the blue and be like, "Hey, can you suck on my nipples till they bleed?" And that's like explicit. Yeah, that's like sure. If we can acknowledge that that's a type of flirting, maybe not a flirting that is going to fly with everyone, but generally everybody agreed that it's like a type of flirting. I don't know. It just seems a bit weird to attribute explicitness to like lack of experience. And I also think that, I think we didn't do the demo, so we don't know what people mean when they're saying that they're being direct and explicit. So I think that's also an issue.
I think the issue is that, just listening to the conversation, I feel like we're like hyper analyzing things like without any like social context. If you're at a club or something, right, and somebody grabs your dick, right, that I guess that's flirty. A lot of people consider that harassment, but in a club setting, lots of people do that and it works out just fine. Lots of people are into that kind of shit. I've had my dick grabbed at clubs. I slipped my hands
Were you into it?
Yeah, it was a great time. Right. There were times where it was a little awkward because I didn't think
That
was
is flirting then, because it was like both wanted and you didn't feel it, and it wasn't inappropriate.
Wait,
yeah.
So this is why I've come up with the ultimate example.
But like, and then if we're talking about, so that's like in a real life context, right? But a lot of women do this. Like I've been sexually harassed in like before I opened up my business. I worked at an office where I was sexually harassed by one of my coworkers, right? And the way that she would do this is whenever I was at the fucking copy machine, she would come by and just brush up against me really close, or lean over the back of my chair and put her boobs on my shoulder and shit like this, right? And I was very explicit with her. She was not interested, right? But she just did it over and over again. And then I reported it to the manager, and he laughed it off, and it was like, nobody gives a fuck, right? And I think that like, but if I were interested in her, if I didn't have a girlfriend at the time, if I thought she was attractive, I would have been totally okay with that, right? So like, I think that this explicit versus like implicit thing is like, it's totally dependent on the context and the person. There are tons of people, like if we're talking about like an online flirting, I think the person is, this is going to sound terrible, is classy or intelligent, I'm going to flirt with them much differently than I do somebody who I think is just horny posting all the time in chat and sending around news all the time, right? I might just tell that person, hey, let me see your tits, and they will probably send them to me, right? So like, it really depends on the situation. I don't think it's fair to say that, you know, people who are more explicit just have.
This is why I came up with the example that needs no context. I want to lick your nipples until they bleed, baby.
It's a form of persuasion, right? Like, I think flirting can be at least a form of
That's
persuasion.
not the only way explicit flirting happens, though. That's not what we mean.
Yeah.
I understand
I
that.
mean, honestly, some
No, I
people
was
just want to cut
answering
off
Ryzen.
time,
Oh.
right? I think some people just want to cut off time. I think, like, I don't think, like, being explicit necessarily means lack of experience. I think it's just
But it's
that,
not flirting, right?
So-
Like when you're like saying like, "Do you want to come over and fuck?" I wouldn't really say it's
Well,
flirting.
Why?
There's nothing, but just because it's
Oh, I
not
wouldn't
flirting
call
doesn't
that
make there
flirting either.
anything wrong with it. It's just like very explicit, and if it gets you to your end goal, that's great. It's just flirting is a bit of a different thing.
Yeah, that's
So-
not what I mean when I say flirting.
necessarily. I don't think it necessarily has to be like a long drawn out process. Just like I don't know.
I think there's a difference between flirting
yeah.
and just saying, can we fuck? At that point,
Yeah.
you're just asking for permission to do a thing. Like,
Yeah.
you could be like, "Oh, can we fuck?" Like, you could say it in a way that, like, has a tone to it, or, like, you want to fuck.
Yeah.
But, like,
I
it's
don't know,
not
I
going to be
think-
like...
Thank you
Wait,
guys so much.
So
Yeah.
can we make
So I
meaningful
think,
distinctions between a couple different things? Because we're using flirting as like a really broad blanket term. And if we separate
Yeah.
different terms, I think it'll be really helpful. So if we classify like platonic flirting as banter, right? That's same similar concept, but it's just platonic. If we describe flirting as this kind of game that we're playing, we can describe in this case when it's explicit. I think that is more akin to foreplay and negotiation in a sexual sense than it actually is flirting. Because if you grab someone's dick, that is either an explicit introduction to sex, which seems meaningfully different, right? So I think that we can make these distinctions, and I would say that it would be negotiation rather than foreplay if you're talking about the initiation of a sexual act.
Why don't
Right.
we say
Can I
proposition?
expand? Can I
Right.
expand just a little bit? Like what I'm saying when I talk about like being more explicit in flirting is like I think that you can still be flirting with somebody and like still initially tell them like I find you like before you start flirting with them like I find you attractive like do you like want to like get drinks later or something like that. Like these are like it's very explicit like my interest in you, right? I'm not straight up asking you to fuck, but I'm telling you I find you attractive and I am interested in you in a certain way. And then any flirting that happens after that, I think is like we can acknowledge as like consensual, right? And like both people are taking part in it in a way that they want to, right?
Yeah, I think that the when it comes to like expressing interest in propositioning, that could definitely be considered flirting, in my opinion. Like if I
think
can
that's
act
more my
very
style.
say one more time.
Yeah, I think that's honestly that's more my style. Like whether that's like asking somebody, "Hey, do you want to hang out later?" and we know it's going to like lead to something else, or if it's just like, "Hey, I find you attractive. Do you want to like get drinks sometime?" And then after that, like, you know, you start being much more flirty to somebody. I think that can very much like explicitness doesn't necessarily mean like lack of experience. I think it's just like what are you looking for? And I'm not trying to like miscommunicate or anything. And I think like for me, I think like just being very forward with what like exactly I want from somebody and getting that in return as well like is pretty meaningful to me.
Well,
I have a question. If somebody just said, "I find you attractive," does the panel consider that flirting?
Yo,
No.
it works on me. Like if someone comes up to me and
Yeah, it
started
works on me
complimenting-
It's really going to depend on how you deliver
Yeah.
it. It's really going to depend on how you deliver it.
Sure, I guess you
Yeah.
could do it like an angry doobie way, like, "Hey,
Okay.
I find you
I don't
very
know.
attractive."
Can I
It'd be
give an
weird.
example of two things that one I would consider and one that I wouldn't consider flirting?
Yes.
Sure, but just very quickly, the reason why I'm asking is because, like, I consider that to be just explicit flirting, which is just type flirting that I enjoy, right? But I think to call that not flirting or to say someone who flirts like that is, like, inexperienced, I think that's a bit weird. But yeah.
Well, I think that we shouldn't call that flirting because I can say, Kyla, I think you're really pretty. I'd like to have dinner with you later. Or I could say, wow, you have gorgeous eyes. I hope that they're sitting across from me later tonight. What are you doing around 5? That is
One is
much more
flirting, one
flirty.
is.
One
Yeah,
is
I agree with
flirty,
you.
one isn't, right?
For sure. Yeah, I agree. It is delivery dependent as well, right? But just
Which is why
because
most of
something
this
has
is
an
implicit. Most of
It's
this
Yeah.
is
it
implicit.
is
This is why I'm
Well,
saying most flirting.
like
I
the
would
only
say-
part that was
Absolutely.
explicit
I think
This
was
is why-
the time after.
This is why
I
people with
think you can-
neurodivergence struggle so much with flirting, because almost all of flirting is implicit. Because the change, if I say, I think you're really attractive to the barista, is very different than being like, hey, like, I think you're really attractive. Totally different vibes, right? But to somebody who's not picking up on those implicit tone changes, different things, right? And so,
Yeah.
like, most of flirting is inherently implicit, which is why people with autism struggle with it so much. Because if they're like, wait, they said I'm attractive, and I'm not really sure what their body language is communicating, and I don't know if that's flirting or not. And you're like, well, I'd have to be there to tell you if it was flirting,
I
right?
think
That's
I'd say
That's the
it
distinction
cannot
that you're
be
making that
flirting
I
if
understand.
you're
thing.
saying
Here's the
exactly
thing,
what
like,
you mean.
what
Like it cannot be.
I think it still can be. I'm still going to disagree on that. I think that you can tell somebody like your intentions, tell somebody that you like, oh, I think you're really cute, like, and like, would you be, interested in going out for drinks later? Like, I think that you can do that, get the affirmative, like, right? Like, and that's a way to like get like confirmation that they're like okay with that, right? And then after that, like why not ramp up the flirting, right? But I don't know, for me, I think it's just I like having that question and answer and getting that affirmative first, and then like moving up the flirting or something.
Would you
Have you
say
guys
that you're
seen those leaked
starting
DMs between
flirting
Destiny and BX
after
Bullet?
you've
Tank, you
already
keep
done
cutting
that?
in, you keep steamrolling people. It's really getting kind of annoying, to be honest. Have you
That's
guys
fair.
seen those leaked DMs between Destiny and BX Bullet? Is that flirting?
I'm unaware of this, so I don't know.
BX Bullet TV. Do you have a sexual relationship with John Zerka?
No, that's not.
No. Could it be? Could there be implicit flirting, but he's just like not aware of like how to do it?
If they're doing like interrogator role play, maybe like I wouldn't call it flirting.
Is what I'm proposing really that strange?
No,
though? Like,
it's not at all, Stardust. Like, I think that this is just a way that some people interact and some people just don't like interacting. I think it's a preference thing, and I think we're trying to apply our preferences on a broader scope than they need to be done. Like, I find it very refreshing when someone's just blunt flirting, like when it's less implicit and more explicit. I prefer that. It helps me understand where people say so there isn't mistakes, right?
But I think there's a
Implicit has point.
miscommunication.
Maybe.
I think that there's and this is kind of like I've noticed it before. I think we're just using explicit and implicit and like direct in different ways. So like the examples that Tank was giving and that Erudite was giving, I see the distinctions between saying, Wick, I find you attractive, versus being like, Wick, you look good right now. Like two different things. I would still call my second version explicit in a way, because it's not very suggestive, and it's more I would consider that direct. So when I'm talking about like being explicit while flirting, that's what I mean. But Erudite like clearly explained there's a lot of implicit things about like the difference between what just happened. So I think we're just using words differently, and it's causing like a breakdown. So I'm pro like everyone just start flirting with each other, and we see how it goes, and you'll see we'll all be on board with that.
Maybe my arguing with you is a form of flirting. Some people do that.
So
I've had that
maybe-
as a form of
Now
flirting.
we're perceiving
Can I
it as
suggest two operational definitions for explicit and implicit, and hopefully we can agree, just so we can like at least move the conversation forward beyond this?
Before you do that, I actually need to head off early. Somebody, thank you very much for having me on. I really, really appreciate it. I'm sorry I had to leave early. Love you guys. Great talk. I'm sure it'll be much better once I'm out of here.
Dewey, thank you very much for bringing your perspective to the conversation. You're a very considerate person and a fantastic guest. Again, you are always welcome here. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
You can make me cry. I gotta go.
What a great guy. I love that frog. I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. Where were we?
I'm going to define explicit and implicit, and like maybe altogether we can come to an okay definition. So I'm not married to this. I'm just coming up with it on the fly. When I'm talking about explicit, I'm typically talking about negotiation specific to something, right? And so like you can be explicit and maybe a little bit flirty in that your tone and stuff like that, but explicit would be communicating what your goals are, what your relationships are. It'd be saying something like, are we flirting? Or I am flirting with you right now. These would all be really explicit, direct ways of saying, like literally saying, because this is what people with autism will often do. They'll say, I am literally flirting with you now. Are we flirting right now? Right? That would be explicit to me. Whereas implicit would be everything where, depending on the tone of how you say it, it is or isn't flirting. All of that is implicit, right? Even like even all the things that we've listed as being like explicit, I'm like, no, these are inherently implicit because you can easily say them without being flirty.
Okay, then if you're using that definition, like I think you would argue that me saying something like, this is good flirting we're having right now would be explicit flirting.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, that's just flirting that I like. So yeah. I also like implicit, but yeah, I like directness.
Yeah, I guess I'm just I'm a little confused. Like I don't know. I like the ability to like kind of like communicate like I like to communicate like what my goals are at least, or when somebody communicates their goals to me before we even before we initiate a lot of that stuff, you know. And I don't know, maybe that's weird. Maybe that's weird of me, but
I don't think that's weird of you, but I think that I definitely understand Erudite's reluctance to call that flirty. I guess like to have to confirm beforehand because you're saying it yourself, like you need that confirmation at the beginning to like know that you're in a secure place to like flirt from before. And I think maybe like that initial confirmation, I wouldn't call it flirting, but I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Like I don't think someone like wanting a more safe space to flirt from is like a bad thing or something that is like makes them a bad flirt, you know. Like if having that space, that safe space makes you more comfortable, that sounds like good flirting to me, you know, whatever flirting makes you happy.
Are we taking this that if you're a bad flirt, that there's something like less valuable about you? Because like when people are being resistant to like, oh, somebody's not a bad flirt, it's like, okay, I used to be a terrible flirt. Terrible. I was really bad, honestly, until I started dating like my now husband. Like I was terrible at flirting, which is fine. Like it just is fine. I don't know. Like I just like I'm worried that we're moralizing.
I think no. It's not like that. I just like I like operating from a space where like I get that confirmation beforehand, and then I feel like I'm safe to like to like kind of like ramp things up after that, you know. And it's like a very like it's a very like indicate goals like first, and then do all of like the foreplay like after. I guess I don't know if that makes sense.
I don't think we're moralizing, but I think I do feel that some of the panel is more because I do think there are many different ways of flirting. I think being a good flirt depends on like the dynamic that you have with the people that you flirt with, how it comes across and stuff like that. So if two people are like having the most cringy conversation, they're like, so did it hurt when you fell from heaven? And they're like, yeah, my ass really hurts right now. And they're like, I wonder if I can help with that. You know, I'd find that like not the best flirting. That wouldn't be my cup of tea. But if two people are like having fun with that, that sounds like good flirting to me.
Yeah,
right?
I think my biggest contention here, like implicit, explicit, okay, for the sake of conversation, I don't want to get bogged down in semantics here. But I guess my biggest contention here is that like we can objectively say what is bad flirting and what is good flirting, right?
Exactly.
I think that it's
we prefer
hard
sophisticated versus unsophisticated flirting potentially.
It really depends on like at the end of the day, it depends on what people are enjoying or not.
But you can enjoy unsophisticated flirting. Two people can both be kind of bad at flirting and enjoy it. It doesn't make them worse. It doesn't make them less valuable, but it is less sophisticated.
And I reach my goals more than the sophisticated flirt. Am I bad at flirting, or am I actually better at it than the sophisticated person? Right.
I think also looking at this from like the context of different cultures, right? Like, I don't know. I think that if you look at it from like different contexts, like it's more accepted in some places to just be like to like even engage with the opposite sex like that, right? And I think some people, like, I don't know, for me, like, engaging with the opposite sex, or even the same sex, but if I'm engaging with those intentions, it feels like you're supposed to be very upfront about it, and just be upfront about it first, and then like flirt after or something like that. I don't know. Maybe I'm weird or something, but yeah, it is what it is.
Weird is why we like you, Stardust. Weird is why we like you.
So at this point, like I am glad with kind of where we got to. There is kind of like this subjectivity, and it sort of is different for each individual person, what they're going to be comfortable with and how they're going to handle these things and what they're going to view as ideal flirting, the same way that people find their ideal partners in different ways. I kind of want to, at this point, now try to, and I guess this is going to be extremely hard, how do we make it so that people know how to handle situations where their boundaries have been crossed? How do we handle people saying, this is where my boundaries are? And how do we educate the general public in how to interact in these types of situations? Like, how do we teach people what's right and what's wrong? And to kind of what Erudite was saying, there are some people that struggle more with these things. How can we help these people?
These people.
I'm sorry.
Like,
Just
what do you mean,
anybody.
I think like what Katie was saying, like there being like a kind of, some people are gonna need like a safer space, I think, where they know that they have like permission to do those things, and where they know that like both parties have gotten like the consent, I guess, beforehand, and then some people are just going to be more comfortable with everything being kind of like vague, I guess. So yeah.
So I would say it's some degree of like training that we can do. So some of the best ways to learn how to flirt is just to watch TV about flirting, right? I would say reality TV is pretty good for learning how to flirt. Or like, even to a degree, watching a pickup artist, although a lot of what they do is going to be cringy and wrong, there are some general principles that they're trying to get across, right? So it's the skill of being able to convey something more than what you're always saying, right? So even if we're saying like the distinction would be like, oh, your eyes are pretty, versus like, oh, your eyes are really pretty. The difference is, okay, I'm stating like something that I think is a fact, right? I think your eyes are pretty. Versus the second one is like, I think your eyes are pretty, and that turns me on, right? I think those are meaningful distinctions. So that's a skill that we're trying to teach. That would be the skill of flirting.
At the end of the day, flirting, if you're really good at communication, odds are you're really good at flirting. If you're really good at understanding someone and communicating with other people, you're probably pretty good at flirting. Because at the end of the day, that's what flirting is. It's a form of communication and persuasion and things like that. And I think that, watching TV to see how to flirt, I don't know about that. Like, I think that we can get a lot of social norms from that. I think that's important. Like, maybe recognizing when other people are trying to flirt, yes. But no, I would be hesitant. When it comes to teaching other people how to do it, I think practice makes perfect, right? Like, learning how communication skills and learning how to do it by actually doing it in safe environments, I think is a great way of learning how to flirt.
Okay, I was going to wait for someone else, but okay, so if you're going to practice, right, you need a skill to be able to practice. Where do you learn the skill? You can learn the skill from a TV show and then practice that skill, right? So you have to have some information beforehand before you can practice that thing, because this is a skill,
Franklin,
right?
100 bits. Thank you so much. Did I talk?
I think flirting is not based on your communication skills. I've always been an excellent communicator. I was a pretty terrible flirter until honestly like the last,
Guy.
I guess 4.5 years ago. really bad at it, even though I was a great communicator, because I was pretty socially anxious, and I was always worried that my flirting would end up in rejection, and I had bad self-esteem stuff. So I also assumed that nobody was flirting with me all the time. So I never tit for tatted when people flirted with me. I'm getting frustrated because I feel like we're all resistant to this, like, so you can be a bad flirter and enjoy it and meet partners who also enjoy it, and that doesn't make you less valuable. It just makes you less skilled at flirting, which is wholly neutral. Your value as a person doesn't change or anything, right? And bad
It's kind of like you're deciding what's bad and what's good flirting based on a certain criteria that feels pretty like what you value.
Social norms.
Yes. Okay.
I've been out there. I've watched people flirt. I've been around lots of flirting, right? Tons of it. And it's like these things are pretty evident. And here's another thing. Girls can be really bad at flirting and they're almost still always successful, right? Whereas men, when they're bad at flirting, it's typically going to be successful for them a little bit less often, right? So like in general, I find that girls are often worse flirts than most men because girls don't have to work as hard as that skill. Does that make women less than men or less valuable? No, they're just not as sophisticated at flirting, which is totally fine. It's a skill that you learn.
Erudite, do you think there's only one way to be good at flirting? Also, do you think that there's forms of flirting that you haven't seen or haven't recognized that people engage in?
I'm sure that there are forms that I haven't seen and don't recognize. I'm talking about like broadly social norms that I think like all of us are exposed to. I think what I'm running into is it feels like I'm running into this issue again. The reality that I feel like I'm working on is like just totally different from other people, and I don't know what to do about it. Like I'm just stuck, and I'm like I want to teach autistic people about how to flirt in North America based on social norms, and apparently like the social norms I'm talking about are just not there.
Well, the issue.
I'm sure they're there. I'm sorry. I don't mean to like interrupt. Maybe yeah, I'm sure like I don't actually never mind. You know what? I don't know anything. All I know is that I need a safe space. So you know what?
It's totally fine.
Whatever.
If people figure out a way to flirt that's beyond social norms, is that not a valid way to flirt? Or like is it bad for us to like not encourage them to get closer to social norms? Like,
so we're still attaching like a value statement when I'm saying bad, which is why I'm trying to switch to like sophisticated versus unsophisticated, because like the way you flirt isn't like there's no value that I'm attaching to this at all. I feel like I'm not. Can you restate your question? Because I don't think I answered your question in my answer.
Oh, my question was basically, oh God. Oh man, I totally lost it. My bad.
So I guess to add to maybe ask it in a different way, like why are we using the metric of social norms to determine what is a sophisticated or unsophisticated? Why aren't we instead
that's the social contract that we're working within?
Why aren't we instead using a metric I feel would be a
I remember my
metric.
question now. It was, can something go beyond social norms and still be considered flirting? And is it bad to not push people away from doing that? Or bad to not push people towards social norm or normative ways of flirting or whatever, however you want to say it?
Yeah, it's a really abstract question, so it's really hard to answer without like a practical example of what you mean. Can somebody go beyond?
Well, let's say what Katie
norms?
was saying before, where people are just throwing pickup lines back at each other, and like it doesn't feel like flirting for most people, or it feels really corny for most people. But like for those two people, it just like works out.
Yeah, and that's great. That doesn't mean that they're sophisticated flirters. It just means that like they happen to meet two people who liked to flirt the same way. In general, I'd say a sophisticated flirter is probably broadly more successful with most people within their society, right?
Yeah.
At least in having good reciprocated flirty banter. That's all I'm trying to say.
So
I don't think that we're operating.
I would say that we can't flirt outside of social norms. It is impossible.
Well, I would argue that actually the metric, the most effective flirters that I have seen in my life have been the ones who defy social norms, who go outside the social norms, because at least from the male perspective, right? Because as a male, you want to differentiate yourself because women get flirted with all the time. So you have to do something different. You have to do something that catches their attention. You have to do something that's just besides being super attractive, right? Let's be real. Like the more attractive you are, the less skill you have to have as flirting, right? But
Yes,
for
that's
someone,
true as well. I'm
yeah.
glad you brought that up.
For someone like me who is middling, 5 at best day, right? I've had to develop at least some social skills. And for me, and what I've observed in others, is by far the most effective flirting, not sophisticated, not unsophisticated, but flirting that actually works to get to the goal of the person involved, is those who lean outside of social norms, who do something unexpected, who do something that's different, that differentiates themselves. And so when we teach people to do these social norm things, we're setting them up for failure as men. We're setting them up for being run of the mill, average, okay at best, right? And so I'm really pushing back against this social norms thing. Like, I think social norms are important to set like hard line boundaries and things like that when we talk about workplaces and things like that. But when it comes to effective flirting, I think think outside the box, gang. Be creative.
Well,
Isn't
I think
that-
there's a distinction here between effective and adept, right? Where like the flirting can be a means to an end and we would describe it as effective. But I think Erudite is saying in order to be considered adept at flirting, we need to be able to navigate situations that are, you know, in a variety of social contexts and maybe with a variety of people. And there would be some conformity to that.
So
No, I
don't
think the
societal
disagreement
norms-
comes from.
ahead.
I think that it comes from this thing where me and Wick want to operate on what sophisticated or good flirting is based on using one metric, and Erudite wants to use another metric. And if we're not using hers, then I don't know. It's just like my metric seems to be about like enjoyment and about like successfulness,
which is fine.
And
I was an unsophisticated flirter and I enjoyed it. It's fine. It's totally fine.
Oh my god!
Even when I'm
can I
saying
just,
sophisticated, I'm probably like
say-
mid-tier because I'm also attractive. So like my success rate is probably largely informed by my attractiveness. I'm actually probably less good at flirting than I even think I am, which is totally
That's not
fine
what
because
I'm
I still
saying.
enjoy it.
I think that
I think-
success and enjoyment is related to. It's just like you have your own metric, which is fine, which is social norms. I think social norms are like really broad and really diverse, and I think that if there are multiple people on this panel who just disagree with your social norms, then that doesn't mean we're operating from a different reality. Maybe it means that the social norms aren't as like fundamentally rooted in reality as you feel they are, which is fine. You know, like if other people have different experiences, then obviously social norms are different across different people.
I don't think Erudite is saying people have homogenous life experiences with homogenous values, no matter what social context they're in. But if, in order to
that's
be considered,
not what I said that you said. Sorry.
Okay, it
What
sounds
did
like you're
Erudite
saying
say?
that it's clarify then.
So
I'm saying that if we're using a metric that is called social norms, but we all have different understandings of what social norms are and and also like the assumption that we should operate from social norms instead of other types of metrics is just like, it's fine that Erudite wants to do that. It's just that the disagreement comes from like, I think me and Wick, we're not very interested in like evaluating flirting in that way. So I guess by Erudite's definition of good or bad or like sophisticated versus unsophisticated flirting, that's fine. It's just I'd consider sophisticated flirting successful flirting that people enjoy from.
You know, there's probably a research on something that we can. I don't have any, and I haven't seen any, right? But there might be some actually research on this that we could look at.
Where would the disagreement lie between the difference between effectiveness and adeptness, as I outlined earlier, though?
Can you explain the difference again?
So effectiveness would be flirting as a means to an end. We can do whatever we want, obviously, as long as it works and we both consider it flirting. But that would be effectiveness, like being an effective flirter. But then adeptness would be like the ability to like adapt to multiple social contexts and situations and know how you might move things in that direction in an elegant manner. And I think that's what Erudite is talking about.
So
I
we're
feel
actually
like
right now defining what flirting is using social norms. So we're collectively deciding what flirting is and how to flirt. So necessarily you cannot flirt outside of social norms because
well, as you can see, there's an entirely different.
We would just call it communication.
Can I just say I don't give a fuck? Can I just say I don't give a fuck? Okay, I don't give a fuck what other people think is flirting and what other people don't think is flirting. All I know is what works for me, right? and I think I know that it works like 99.9% of the time. I'm only putting 0.9% because but yeah, who knows, maybe it's bad, maybe it's good, who knows. All I know is that it works, and all I know is that it, regardless of who it is very clear like what my intentions are with them, right? Or what somebody else's intentions are with me. When it's like more vague, there's too much room for things, for somebody to misinterpret friendliness as flirting, and then like somebody to cross the boundary, and then for them to pretend that like you didn't make it clear that you weren't interested in that way several times to them prior to that. And it just makes it, I don't know, for me, I don't like that vagueness. I don't like giving people that ability to just pretend like there was no indication that I wasn't interested, because it's just like one too many times somebody will take advantage of that, of you being friendly, and push and push and push your boundaries, and like until you're like, until you have to take like serious action, right? And so like I don't like this whole like good flirting, bad flirting stuff. Like I think it's just like, at the end of the day, like, what is effective for you? Do people respect your boundaries when you communicate your boundaries? Do people respect you when you say that, hey, I'm not interested in that way, like, hey, yeah, I'm happy with my boyfriend, but thank you, or do people keep saying like, oh, are you sure you're happy with your boyfriend? Or do they keep pushing you? Do they follow you around? Like, so I think this good and bad metric doesn't really matter. It's like just going to be like what works for you. So
I think the good or bad is like the difference. Like we can think of like a rock climber who just like knows how to climb up one precipice, one, like, I don't know how to say it, edifice, like whatever. They know how to climb up one mountain or whatever, one rock face, right? Compared to somebody who might be like a rock climbing instructor who could like train people in like what they need to look for in order to figure out if something is safe and like how to harness up. Like that's how I think of the difference here. And I think that there is like something to say for like people who could be more effective, or rather could adapt to more situations and like have more experience than like just have like a specific way of doing things that kind of worked out for them because the people that they're with are similar to them.
But you see, I thought about the definitions that you were giving, and I just don't see how those things are like, maybe you didn't say that they're mutually exclusive, but I think someone can be effective and adaptive at the same time. Oh yeah,
you can be both. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah, so I don't see, I don't know, when I hear adaptive, I hear like someone that can flirt with like many different ways, which, but then you brought in like the word sophisticated or elegant into it, which again, I'd argue is like so subjective. Like what's elegant to someone and what's not is really.
By elegant, I just mean that it like gets inserted in a way that isn't off-putting. It feels like it goes with the flow, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so I'd argue that that's exactly what me and Wick are saying. If you're able to flirt in a way that doesn't make the other person uncomfortable and in a way that makes them happy, then that's elegant,
In that situation. And then if you can do that with multiple other people, then that's great. Yeah. You're probably pretty good at flirting. Here's the thing. You can be good at flirting and enjoy it. You can be good at flirting and not enjoy it. You can be bad at flirting and enjoy it. And you can be bad at flirting and not enjoy it. Sure. And people will enjoy your flirting more if you enjoy it, right? So even if you're bad at flirting, but you kind of enjoy it and you kind of like embrace it being like, I'm kind of like awkward and like socially weird and I like stumble a lot and like my flirting game is bad, but you enjoy it, people are also going to enjoy that more. But it's also okay to say like, yeah, I'm not very good at flirting, right? It's fine. Here's the thing though, is if somebody's bad at flirting and they don't enjoy it, they might enjoy it more if they can figure out how to be good at flirting, which is going to be determined by the social norms that you're in.
You can be a level 1 Pokemon and still win a fight.
Because you said this earlier, and it's like, I guess I'm just wondering, is this mostly coming from the perspective that you really want to help like autistic people or people on the spectrum to like have a better experiences with flirting, and this is where most of the stuff is coming from?
I think our social scripts around sexual engagements are fucking terrible in our society because people typically can't engage in super nuanced conversation about what it looks like or make good prescriptions for people to work within that are uncertain about how to move forward. And so in general, what I'm trying to do is to make some level of systemization that I can share with people that's going to make them feel a little bit more comfortable and a little bit more confident, and I'm going to do that within the social norm framework that we live within, right? And so flirting in a different culture is like if somebody comes to me from Syria and they're asking how to flirt, probably I'm not going to be the most informed because I imagine the flirting and dating protocols of Syria looks a lot different than Canada. But from Canada, I can definitely help those guys out a little bit, theoretically.
But erudite, like, that's a separate issue, right? Like, I agree with
Yeah.
that. Like, everything you just said, boom, 100% agree. But that's a separate issue between when we categorize the sophistication or adaptiveness or adeptness, whatever word you want to use here, of a flirting style, right? And I think that, yes, it would help. Like, you got to learn the basics. You got to learn to walk before you can run, right? So teaching people who don't know the basics is very important, but we have to understand that those are like the basics, right? Like, you mentioned a whole lot of strategies here, and these are communicative strategies, like humanizing yourself so that people take you more seriously, or at least view you as someone they can trust because they can relate to. Not only works in flirting, but it works in communication as well. Like I said, there's a lot of crossover between skills, like a lot of crossover between these two skills.
So we
Yeah,
get
I
those
also-
skills from social norms. There are social norms around flirting. That's where we learn the basics. You can adapt them to your
No.
specific style and your preferences based on that. But we work within the social structures that we're in. So flirting naturally will be different in different societies, right? That's what kind of like Erudite was talking about. But we need to know the basics, and the basics
thank you so
are
much.
how society defines and describes flirting. We need to know how it works in order for us to then be adaptive and
How
make
the
change.
basic version of it works, yeah.
Well,
Yes.
even then you run into problems, though, because we can't even agree what flirting is on this panel, okay?
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's obviously issues here. And to say that, oh, we just use the social norms, it's sidestepping a lot of problems. It's hand-waving away a lot of issues, because I would argue that the social norms in America, in North America at least, kind of suck. They kind of suck, okay?
Well,
Like
we're saying we can't decide on what is flirting on the panel because there's no essentialist definition we can provide for anything, especially when it comes to social social situations and whether something is or is not a certain whether something is going to be taken a certain way in a social setting. There's always a context there, so we can't.
Yeah, so
define it
appealing to
as
social
simple.
norms feels pointless because, it's kind of like, I don't.
So
Well, there's-
we've tried
there's like
to
a
give an
average
definition
that-
several times. Why don't
There
we
is
just
an
work within
average.
those definitions that we gave, right? Because we can't define it in terms of social norms. You're right. That's why at the very start of the conversation, we tried to define these things so that we could talk about them. So let's use the ones that we gave.
Okay. Like what? Like the banter and the preposition and the
Yes.
flirting? Okay.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you a question about that. So when you call that like just platonic, playful flirting, would we be okay calling it sexual banter, or would you still consider it banter because it doesn't have the prospect of moving?
So I would call it flirting. So like I would make two distinctions. So we're still doing that game. It's still like seeing compatibility and interest. It's banter if it's purely platonic. It's flirting if there's potential for there to be a sexual relationship.
Wait, but what if
For
it's
sexual tension.
flirtatious, but there isn't potential for it
I would
to
say
go
if it's
anywhere
building
else?
sexual tension,
Mhm.
that it would be
Okay.
flirting. I'd be
Yeah.
more comfortable
Okay,
with that than just an actual relationship.
I could also
Okay.
see where there might be a difference in one person's mind from the other, potentially, Tink, yeah? One
Yeah,
person
it
might
can
think that
move
there's a potential and
from
the
one
other
to the
person
other.
think that there isn't.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So, like,
just because you're
these
feeling
aren't-
sexual tension doesn't mean the other party is. Yeah.
Yeah, like these aren't mutually exclusive things. You can move from playful banter to flirting, right? That happens pretty frequently.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so even if we take that definition for the sake of moving conversation forward, okay, sure. I disagree with it, but okay, sure, let's go with it. To what end do we use that when it comes to social norms? I get the broader concept that nothing we can do can be entirely outside of or unconnected, I should say, of social norms, because you're either outside of them or you're inside of them. So in some way you're connected to this social norm, right?
Well, I think social norms they exist even if we redefine them or recontextualize them or insert different values. Like social norms are always the milieu we're like mixed up in.
And the nuance changes based on situation. So the social norms of Christian flirting is going to be a little bit different than the social norms of other things. And a sophisticated flirter is going to be able to adjust between these settings a little bit better, which again, please, Katie, please, I am not attaching a value statement to sophisticated. You can be sophisticated and wonderful and enjoy flirting.
I understand that. I think it's just like your objective fail.
No, you don't. Stop, Katie. You aren't understanding. You're genuinely not. And I don't know how to get this across, that there is no emotional attachment when I'm saying sophisticated. I'm using a word to try to just be concise and precise in this conversation. There's no attachment of value whatsoever. You are not better or worse. You don't need to be a sophisticated flirter. You can be, it's fine. It's just a word.
I understand that. It's not about the fact that I think you're moralizing it. It's about the fact that I just don't agree with your metric, and I'm allowed to not agree with it while not saying that you're moralizing, right? I can just say that your measurements are subjective and I reject them. That's something I can do, and without thinking that you're moralizing, right?
Well, in that case, Erudite, can you give can you try to define sophisticated in a descriptive way so that we can tell that it's not more subjective, or that we can just at least agree to that so we're not fighting over that term?
Sure. When I'm talking about sophisticated, I'm talking about an individual who seems to be highly successful, good at engaging and flirting in multiple different social settings and within their culture. So in their broad culture, they seem to be pretty good at flirting, what is socially acceptable for flirting. And when they go into more niche parts of their culture, they can adapt pretty well and still be highly successful, versus somebody else who might be less sophisticated at flirting and does a little bit better in only certain venues and social norms that they're really comfortable with and know a lot about the social milieu.
So, Katie, then do you believe that those things that Erudite outlined can be objectively determined?
That can they be objectively determined? Absolutely not. I generally, I don't have an issue with what she said. I think it's, again, my issue isn't necessarily that she chooses to build this metric. It's more that I think it's less useful societally. But I don't have an objection to like the internal logic of it. It's fine as far as I'm concerned.
So it's really useful. Like, it's really useful. So the way that we can actually gain skills is by exposure and experience, right? So the type of person that Erudite is talking about is someone who has the experience with multiple different social groups in order to understand different ways in which different communities flirt, right? So with this understanding, they're able to deploy different tactics of flirting that are more useful in these different social groups to accomplish the goal. If we're saying that the goal in this case, in flirting, is sexual potential, then the ability to be, in this case, if we're defining that as someone who is complex and their ability to flirt, that is better because they're able to do this. They're able to flirt successfully, meaning achieve that goal in multiple different social settings because of their experience and exposure to those communities.
Okay.
So to move the conversation forward, like we've butted heads on this enough. I think we can move it forward, and we'll just go with yours. Fair. In that case, to somebody's question, which was, if I remember it correctly, what is the best way to inform people of these things and to teach others? I think that my answer to that question is going to differ between, if you're asking me on an individual level, like how would I teach some dummy online here to flirt better, right? Versus what I would ask to be done on a societal level. Societal level, I don't know. I'm going to put that out right there. But on an individual level, I would simply encourage and help with some dummy somebody. Sorry, you have a different Twitch name and a Twitter name, so it confuses me. I apologize.
Thank you.
Somebody online. If I would encourage and go with him and kind of show him, like set examples. Also, have him in places where he can view other people's examples on an individual level. I wouldn't want to do it through TV. I think that I don't know. I think that telling someone to watch a show or something it's a scripted thing, right? It's very rarely natural unless you go onto reality television or something like that. And even then, people are going to behave differently if they know they're being observed. And so I see that even that is kind of unnatural in a way. And so I would want them to have experiences in settings where flirting is commonly accepted, like at bars, at clubs, and things, and even in the park and locations, things like that.
I think that that's better for learning the skill, but I want a safe arena where they can get like some very basic information first before they go get real world experience. I think that that's useful. So I think that reality shows and like dating shows, stuff like that, can be really helpful and safe for them to like sort of observe these things without going out and trying to engage in those experiences before they have any idea what they're doing, right? So it's kind of like, so before you do an experiment, you might want to read about the experiment first before you even start to get out the materials and read the like procedure that you're about to start, right?
So I think that yes, in concept, but in practice, these shows are heavily edited. And obviously they're edited for entertainment purposes. So they want to showcase, in a lot of cases, I don't know, I haven't watched a lot of it, but like 90 Day Fiancé or Married at First Sight and all these shows, right? They have a incentive, the producers, to put forward things that create drama and cause drama. So my concern is that by pointing people to these resources, they're going to come away with methods that are tend towards drama rather than effect.
Thank you again for being.
And that's
I agree. I think they will, but I want to give them somewhere to start first before just kind of like throwing them to the wolves, right? Or at least like in this case, we can say like go with a friend, right? So like go out with someone who you know is really experienced with flirting, right? So like maybe like find one of your friends who has had some level of success and go to them specifically and say like, hey, what do you do? Like, can we go out sometime? And you go to a bar with them, right? So I would say like your very, very basics can be like these shows, right? Because it's not going to give you the best information. It's going to lead towards drama. It's not really going to tell you what flirting looks like in your area. The best way to see this in process is going to be with someone that you know, like some reference point. And then actually the best way to like really like move this skill forward and make this skill your own and get to that point of adaptability will be with that experience of actually, okay, you've got the scaffolding, you've seen it in action, it's time to try, right?
So was the question, how do we teach people to be good flirts, or just how do we teach people to, can you repeat the question for me?
So I personally kind of like the idea of there being like a flirting class in high school, or maybe an elective at a community college where we teach people how to socially interact. Should we be encouraging people to go to like online dating or like speed dating things, and we have coaches with gavels like going, hey, you're not dating right? And so how do we teach people how to be a little bit less creepy, cringy, and a little bit more good at flirting?
I think your definition of good at flirting is now different than what we were talking about for most of the panel. So I think what you mean
by a different definition. I'm just trying to reframe my original. We
almost moved past it. We almost got past it.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that at all.
Somebody's fault.
I'm trying to move. I wasn't trying to bring it back. I was trying to adopt Erudite's definition to talk from it and to basically say that I think people should focus a lot less on being good or sophisticated flirters and just be the type of flirters that they want to be. So basically, I would argue that the classes should be about like introspection, figuring out what you want, figuring out if you're a flirter, if that's something you're even interested in. We just like value flirting or good flirting as something that is like
Is my question.
know about
Should
a
it be a
class.
course?
I
Should
think-
there be a teacher or
I
a coach
think-
or a judge?
I don't know.
I
that
think there
there's
should be
necessarily a class, but I don't know. Sorry, Katie was answering first. So
I think there should be a class about general life skills, about introspection, about getting to know oneself. I don't see why we need to relegate people into general advice that's not going to work for. I mean, I think Erudite can give a lot of good advice to autistic people or people who need like basic guidance or whatever, and I think that's valuable. I don't know if a class is something I'd support. I'd support classes for other things.
So, some dummy, and just real quick, I know I don't want to monopolize the conversation here, so I really quick to demonstrate why having a class on this would probably be a bad idea, or having a judge. So, somebody, can you give a grade to Stardust, Katie, and Erudite on how well they are at flirting? Can you do that? Would you be comfortable doing that?
Never
Yes!
a million years.
What if you get with the teacher by the end? What if the grade is based on whether or not you can fuck the teacher?
I might be able to grade
fantastic.
under that.
Could you
circumstance.
grade how well
And then
somebody's
I'll get
doing in a
zeros.
debate?
Rate
Yes.
Me, somebody
Can
rate
I-
me. I flirted with you.
Nick
Can
is
I-
a
can I
10 in
just say,
every
I-
regard.
You can rate
Oh, yeah.
social engagements all the time.
Check.
Like people go to therapy to learn social skills where basically we say you're kind of bad at it and we get them better at it. A class teaching people social norms and how to socially engage is the best fucking idea ever. It's a really good idea. Really good, particularly, especially for people who have immigrated and aren't used to the social norms of the new country that they're living in, and they're having a really hard time making friendships because they're working with different communication norms. It's such a good idea, and I'm so behind it, and I literally can't fathom. Oh yeah, sorry.
Okay. So
Heated.
I can say that like in specific cases, like you're talking about Nazi Erudite, sure, certainly. Like for people who are coming from a different place, who have different norms, definitely I could see it being useful for them, even for like autistic people or just
Omni
people,
Slap.
you know,
Thank you
who
for
are
joining me,
like
friend.
neurodivergent. It could definitely be useful. I think though that I think that we should put some value though, like on I think we should put some value on being like pretty explicit though, because I think that's like a very safe way to do things, and like regardless of like whether it's like you viewed as sophisticated or not, I think it's just a way to ensure that everybody who's participating in something is consenting and is comfortable and has the ability to at any time say that they're uncomfortable in a very explicit way without there like being a lot of issues. So I don't know.
So I definitely agree. So we should always be able to like express with like very clearly, okay, I'm not comfortable, right? But like within flirting, which is like the way that we're defining it is sort of like this game, you would end the game when you say, okay, now I'm uncomfortable, because then the game is over, right? So like you're establishing that hard line. But kind of like this is why I think that would be a great idea. So it's kind of like language, right? So
But
like
even if
we'll
there's-
take like
there's a-
English, for example.
But even
So like
with
we have
that-
grammar rules that define the way that sentence structures work, right?
Okay,
And then you
if-
can
if-
change
if
the style to
flirting
make it
is-
your own.
If flirting is not supposed to be like have hard lines and stuff like you guys are talking, and then somebody says like gives a very concrete answer to say like, hey, you know, like I have a boyfriend, I'm not really interested in this. Like I don't know, I've come across a scenario like too many times where somebody will still take that as a soft answer and continue like making advances, right? So like establishing a hard line from the beginning seems like only like a good idea because you know like pretty quickly to take that person's word like and take it seriously. Whereas like if you're starting from like from a very gray area, like anything that you say can be taken as gray, right?
So we
Sure.
do social skill training all the time, right? And this isn't even just for people who are immigrants or people who have like autism. This can just be people who are naturally not very good at social engagement. This can be for people like the way that you flirt with people like in a really rural town that's maybe more remote might be a little bit different than how you flirt with people like in a major city. So it's actually just for people to like learn how to tailor their social interaction. And the idea that like we can't have hard rules, no, but you can have good rules of thumb, which is literally all psychology does. Like that's a huge portion of psychology, is finding general norms within the culture that we're studying and saying this is generally what seems to work. And then sometimes we can even, in rare cases, universalize things, right? So for example, negging in our culture, for the most part, people really like it. They like to, like, teasing back and forth seems to go well between basically any gender, which is great. I don't think that that would necessarily be the case in a different country. Whereas, for example, a really good general principle that might be more like universal would be like, when you start flirting, go in with the easiest, lightest, lowest risk flirt, so that if they're not interested, they have a really easy way of saying no. The rejection's as mild as possible, and you make the person as like not uncomfortable as possible. And then in social skills class, most of the time people practice on each other. So you're giving all these people who have very little experience, who are not good at social engagements, getting to practice with other people in a learning session with two instructors who are really socially skilled.
What I think about it as is like the equivalent of like a persuasive speech class or like a persuasive essay writing class. And like there are norms around that when it comes to like doing a better job or not doing better, you know, not doing a job, being more successful. And that's based on like how an aggregate of people who are just from like the general population will respond to that type of thing. Or maybe there's just some kind of like heuristics that our brain operates on that we can like exploit in that kind of speech. But I think of it as very much the same thing. Like there's not hard rules for everybody that's going to work 100% of the time, or you're going to persuade everybody. But there are more successful ways to do it, more quote unquote sophisticated ways to do it.
So these classes, where would they be taking place, and what setting, to what ages? Just general questions. Dummy, I think you brought it up, so maybe you could tell me what you had in mind.
I'm sorry, repeat that real quick to me.
You asked about like if there should be a class for flirting, right? When you asked that, can you give me like a setting that you would think is appropriate, or maybe Rhizome or Erudite? Like what type of classes are we talking about? Like, are they elective classes at school, or is it like a training dating thing
If
that
I
you
had
can
to
do? Like,
imagine it would be an elective thing that you do on your own as an adult. That's how I imagine
yeah,
it.
I'm on board with that. That's already happening. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I mean,
that sounds awesome.
You could already pick classes like this. These exist, right?
Yeah.
I'm not
They
trying
already
to
happen.
suggest they don't exist. I was just playing it based on the context given of the question, you know.
No, I was objecting something that was like, yeah, I'm not against people taking classes they want to take.
My objection specifically would be like a high school class or something. Like I think that there's a school in education, the system, it is a way to educate our children on social norms, right? Like that already happens in school altogether. And that's one of the reasons why I homeschooling, if it's not supplemented by other social interactions and things like that, can be very harmful for a child, I would argue. That's another discussion, though. But when it comes to having I'm just imagining a situation where someone gets a D or an F and fails their flirting class, and just the going forward, how that would affect them,
right
right?
now, Wick, social emotional learning is a part of schools. It happens kind of more implicitly. It has to do a lot with like the forms of discipline or like the conversations around like social issues that come up amongst the student body. Like they'll either sit down with students and talk to them, or like, you know, try to preempt conversations by having by talking about differences in people and things like that. So anyway, social emotional learning is something that like already happens. I mean, regardless of whether we like explicitly teach it or try to steer it or not. But it's never usually like something you're going to get graded on. And I think if we're talking about like flirting class, I don't think that would be what it looks like. I think it's more just about like how to have an interaction and know your boundaries, know when you're uncomfortable, learn yourself a bit, right? Like that would be the type of class, like do a temperature
That's
check,
what I
you know,
was,
that kind of thing, right?
That's what I was supporting as well. Like, I think just the general class about like, and that's what I consider part of communication.
It would just be a part of the course, right? There's parts of school that aren't graded. I'm an educator. There's a lot of like conversations that happen in elementary school classrooms, for example, like at the beginning of the day, that are just more like group building, talking about issues that the group is facing and stuff like that. That doesn't get graded. There's feedback on that. There's like stuff that goes home to the parents based on that, but it's not like your student failed at being the suavest flirter, you know?
Well, so I think that I'd be pretty comfortable and think that we should initiate at the very least pass fail, because if someone fails flirting class, I would rather they like suffer the emotional damage of failing flirting class than for them to sexually assault someone, right? Or for them
Can I
to
ask
push
a
a
question,
boundary
though?
of someone that was not okay for them to be pushed, right?
Tink, but do you consider what Rhizome said to be flirting class? Because I don't. Like, I just see those as like fundamental general life skills that should be taught, and that like those are valid classes that need to happen in schools, and I 100% support that. Flirting class is something a bit different for me. So I think maybe I'm just getting hung up on like, what we think flirting class actually means.
Also, I don't know. Like, I feel like you could probably pass this class and still push boundaries and still assault someone and still do all this. Passing
Let's
this
just
class,
again remember this is not a class where there's tests that you pass and then you just show the right behaviors and then you go off and realize. This is more like feedback that happens through observations, and the teacher kind of takes the temperature
Modeling
of the room, and like talks about like the dynamic that they're witnessing. It's not so much about like an explicit class. It's just more implicit to the learning that is happening, and it's just something that like kids are perpetually navigating social situations. So
sure, but in
being
the
able to-
concept of Tinkerbell's suggestion, like
that might be a separate thing.
Okay.
What I'm hearing, I could be wrong. I guess like my interpretation of this would be like a structured class that is focused on training social skills. You could, if you really want to tailor it to sexual relationships, you could call it dating and relationship skills, because flirting skills is probably not going to sell to anyone. It sounds weird, right? Dating and relationship skills, right? And in there would be flirting, right? Because flirting is part of establishing a relationship a lot of the time for many people. And ideally, there's going to be feedback, right? So if somebody is having a really hard time, their partner might be like, yeah, I don't know, that like, didn't work super well for me. So they're going to get a little bit of that natural social correction anyways. And then as teachers are walking around, if they see people like saying really, really strange things where maybe their partner's like really uncomfortable, the teacher can step in and be like, hey, this is why this is generally viewed as inappropriate. Here's a different way of approaching this. This is verbatim what I would maybe try saying instead, right? And so there's this feedback. And ideally, I don't know, a pass-fail system isn't the worst idea, because if somebody's really struggling, it's worth probably knowing, hey, they're not being successful. Is there other remedial classes they could take? Are there simpler classes that they maybe need to start out with? To build this, or like, sure, I guess we can just do like an open class of training and you can pass or not fail. Like if it's for adults, I don't think you can pass or fail. It's just like you get a certificate at the end. When I'm talking about in school, though, it might be worth including like a pass fail.
Hey, ladies,
like,
I'm a certified flirter.
I just want to say that your method goes a little bit beyond what I would prescribe. I think just like having the conversations about boundaries, I don't think we need to like put them in test scenarios and be like, all right, I want you.
I'm not talking about testing.
No, you know what I mean? Like they're like having conversations with other students and like putting to use the skills that they've learned. I don't think that like needs to happen necessarily. But yeah.
Could you imagine Tucker Carlson like, they're trying to teach our kids how to flirt and date?
Okay, so I've run social skill training classes. They're not that weird. We do a lot of the things that you guys are talking about, and they're pretty successful. In fact, they're highly successful at training social skills. Now, like the pass-fail piece would be specific for like high school, because in that space you can get like a kid remedial, like extra support. That would be the only purpose for a pass-fail. So if we don't use the word fail, we can use like a different word for being like, hey, you need extra support in this idea. No, I know it's not for you. I'm just clearing that up for the rest of the panel, because there's a lot of people on the panel that do care about that. I think
this is something that's implicit to the teaching that happens. I don't know that like doing it in an explicit manner adds much, and much more than just saying like, hey, this is, like the dynamic, and like, let me outline it for you so you can better understand it when you encounter it. But yeah, so I don't know, what you were outlining sounds like a little bit more direct in terms of training, and like that is not something I was imagining when I was just clarifying that.
Yeah, I want a structured system because I don't think this is for everyone, right? I imagine like probably most of the people on the panel might not necessarily be interested in it, but for people who are really struggling and need that extra help, having a highly structured class can be really valuable to them.
Be good.
So I like the structure even if you don't necessarily need it, right? That would have been my favorite class in high school if that class existed. That would have been my favorite. Just like a class where you just essentially just spit game and like that's the whole class. You just like spit game with your friends. That sounds fun.
Sounds
So
like lunch. It sounds like lunch.
yeah,
hour for
that
me.
sounds
But
like
not
lunch.
for bullied kids, not for kids who have no friends. It's not lunch for them. These kids need some space to do it as well. And so, sure, we can just do it as adults, right? But like a lot of these kids aren't going to go when they become adults. They're not necessarily going to search it out. And just by the way, like I guess I want to put out, we're literally quibbling over a thing that literally doesn't exist, and none of us have the power to implement. And we're getting specific
does
about a
exist.
thing that doesn't.
Yeah,
This type of
It
system does
exists
not
through
exist in
pick-
high school.
Okay, so not through high school, but it exists in like pickup artist class and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, but I don't think anyone disagreed with the adult, the adult class you can pay for. I think we're quibbling over the high school class.
So we should just give pickup artist classes then to kids, I guess.
That's not at all what I said.
So again, that's
I'm just
kind of
joking.
where I had originally framed this concept coming from, is I feel like the only option that some people have for this is, hey, go do pickup artist classes if you feel like you're struggling. And then alternatively, there are like classes that we give people when they have been victimized in different situations for how to better be safe in society and be comfortable going back into society again, like after a traumatic experience. And again, I guess maybe I'm looking for a better option that is a little bit less manipulative or deceptive on the one end, and then a little bit less reactionary on the other end.
Somebody in my chat makes a very good point. And they said, isn't poetry class just outdated flirting class? I tend to agree with that.
No, because poetry
Sorry.
has nothing to do with like the zim of like social engagement. And to be honest, like because kids spend so much time at school and oftentimes are at home on the internet, social skills do seem to be decreasing over time. And so implementing some form of social training might actually be beneficial. You could even do it younger. If you don't want to do it with high school kids, maybe do it with elementary kids. And make it much more like make it elementary age appropriate, obviously.
Again, I really do like some of the things that we've talked about today. I like the idea of breaking this like social taboo barrier of having teachers talk to students about like the way that social interactions are working, even potentially if there is like a romantic aspect to these social interactions. Again, I'm not sure that we need to jam all the kids into a classroom and go, all right, everybody, you didn't pass your test and it's time for final examination, so let's see who's going to fail. I think that this conversation has been extremely productive. I think that we found a lot of things out about like kind of the first half of it. I think that in the second half of it, we've kind of learned a lot of things. I feel like we are kind of moving toward winding down. I want to give you guys a chance to, make any final pieces if you can, and then we're going to move into closing statements after a little while. So let's do maybe another 10-15 minutes if we've got anything else we want to say, and then we'll go in opposite order for closing statements when I feel like that's time in a little bit.
Again, I see value in this suggestion of training and having social training, and right, like, I guess just where I might object a little bit is having it specifically about flirting and dating, right? Like, I don't know if the classroom set, like, I don't know if it's the correct setting to have as a general elective, right? Like having it as an option, like you already do this kind of class, correct, Erudite? You already hold these kind of classes. You already hold this kind of training, correct?
For women with addictions who are
Okay,
in a
but
rehab
you think
center.
it would be, but I would imagine that there might be a value in extending it towards people who are more bullied in school, as you would say, things like that. I can imagine that. But as a general class, I don't know. I just, this is the first time I've considered it, and my initial thoughts on it are, well, these might be negative things to come out of it. And so if I'm coming off combative, it's because I'm trying to work through what I think would be the problem aspects. Does that make sense?
I think it would be better in this conversation if we clarified, because when people are like describing even like because like I have a different idea than Rhizome, who has a different idea from Tink, and a lot of people are prescribing things to like my idea, for example, or maybe Tink's idea that is not at all what I'm saying. Like nobody's even asked if I thought it should be a general forced class or supplementary, and it's like obviously supplementary. Like I would say obviously supplementary. So like I think a lot of this breakdown has just been like not in like clarifying one another's positions to some extent.
There.
I would be totally down for having it as a gen ed. If we can make flirting as uniform as possible so that we can clearly define social rules around dating, that would be so good for our ability to communicate clearly with one another. So, I mean, that would just make communication so much easier. If the goal is for two people to figure out, okay, do I like this person? Do I want to spend more time with this person? And are they into me? The closer that we can come to some like common metric that we can use as uniformly as possible to get like with the like best degree of certainty that we can, like that achievable goal, like that what we want is to like figure out those things. I think that would be great. So having this class that is structured.
I think that you're going to run into a lot of parents who are like very uncomfortable with their child learning how to flirt in school.
And I'm skeptical as well as to the efficacy of it. Like, I do not think that we could have a like one curriculum that rules them all that's going to get us all to a shared method of communication.
I'm pretty sure my mom would have an aneurysm if, like, just being real with you guys, like in high school, if they were offering, or if it was like a gen ed class I was taking in high school, like a flirting class, like she would definitely have an aneurysm over that.
What about
like,
relationships and dating?
Can
What if it was relationships
I
and
wasn't
dating with
allowed
a
to date.
counselor?
I was not allowed to date until I was in college. She would have an aneurysm, anything before college. So.
Which is fair, which is why I'm saying it's probably better supplementary at this point in time. But which not to quibble from Tink. But yeah, would people be opposed to a dating and relationships class that's supplementary?
I
care
don't think
at this
she would
point?
think, I mean, it's supplementary. I guess it wouldn't be as bad, but she would still probably not like that. It was there, so.
Can I ask you, Tink, I have a question. So it feels like some of the concern and some of the want to like standardize or like make it so flirting is more uniform is to avoid certain types of like pitfalls that are very dangerous, like, you know, people crossing boundaries and stuff like that. So maybe I'm just like getting the wires like completely across, because again, like I am all for like a class that talks about like how we shouldn't push boundaries and like teach people to like understand a bit more and try to be more communicative. So like a communications class, for sure, I'm down with that. I think that's fantastic. I think we should do that from a very young age, and I think it should be mandatory. I don't think that's a flirting thing though. So I think maybe I actually agree with you a lot, and I'm just like really getting hung up on like when you say flirting, I'm like thinking about, okay, so you're going to teach people how to be like a good flirt. And for me, like being a decent person who like has the general social skills to not be inappropriate is not what I'd consider be a good flirt. That's just what I'd consider having good communication skills, you know? So maybe I'm a lot more on board with you, and there's just like a miscommunication there. I'm not sure about that.
What if flirting is just one aspect of the curriculum for that class?
What age are we talking about?
We're talking like high school age, right? So,
Also-
or even at the point that it becomes college age. At that point, like if people choose to go to college, once you can like consent to these acts, we should probably be able to communicate how to engage with this, right? So like once you're legally able to engage in sex acts, we should probably be able to communicate about ways to be safe about it, right?
So ways to be safe about it for me is not flirting though, right? So negotiation class and like communication class is for me different than a flirting class, again, which is why I think we might actually agree, and you're just using flirting as a way more of a general term that I'm willing to call it, and I'm just not sure about that. So
that's
but
right. So I'm fine with this specific aspect as well, but I would add on the flirting aspect. because successful flirting will be able to get you to this point where you are negotiating boundaries, like safe sex boundaries, right?
I'd argue that it's the actually other way around. Like you need those those other skills to be able to do successful flirting, or it would work more the other way around than the other. But yeah, I just don't.
I recognize you.
I don't want to standardize flirting. I guess I want to standardize.
flirting, yeah.
Do you think social skills class standardizes social skills?
Of course it does.
No, because everyone has a unique personality, right? Usually in social skills training, we don't say these things to people. We say these are the general rules of thumb. These are ways that you can establish boundaries, and then we get you to practice it. And then people explore different ways that they express boundaries that work for them. It's extremely generative because everyone's unique in their personality, but good rules of thumb can still be applied across the board.
And
right? Touching a random person
standardized
on the street is probably in the bathing suit area is probably a good general rule of thumb that I think everyone societally would be willing to agree on, right? There are other good rules of thumb that you can teach people in social skills. They're very I've never taught a boundaries social skills class where anyone looked stiff or structured or it was uniformed boundaries. Every single client had a different way of delivering the boundaries, even just in what they said, their tones, the things that they felt they needed boundaries over.
That's fine, but rules of thumbs are generally just a way we standardize. It doesn't mean that we're all robots, but it does mean that there's a list of generally probably good things that we recommend people engage in. I don't think we disagree on that.
Right, which serves to allow people to engage in social skills better, right? So if we teach people some good general rules of thumb about flirting, those people are not necessarily, right? They might become predators and monsters, but they're a little bit more likely to have the skills that they need to maybe not creep a girl out when they're trying to ask her for her number.
So I think social skills generally would make someone a very good flirt. I know we disagree on that. I am pro having mandatory social skills. Not so much social skills, more emotional regulation skills and communication skills taught at a very young age at school. Flirting, if a school wants to make a supplementary, an elective class for that, sure, whatever. I just don't see the need for it.
Do you think boundary specific class, so it's a social communication skill, but it's literally called boundaries, and all we talk about the entire time is boundaries. So it's very, very specific. Do you think that people who would be good at communication are inherently also really good at boundaries?
They're not inherently good at boundaries. There's probably some correlation there, but not necessarily.
Right. So it's I would argue it's super beneficial to have boundaries classes for people who struggle with boundaries, regardless of their communication skills.
I think boundary classes would be good to have, even if I don't think if you're, I don't even know how you would determine what students are good at boundaries and what aren't. So it would have to be a general.
Usually they self-identify, right? You'd say, do you feel like you're good at boundaries? And people are pretty good at
I'm not.
Yeah, no, I'm shit at it.
No,
I think also some of that has to do. I think some of that has to do though, when it comes to boundaries, people who push boundaries on a consistent basis generally have different views about the people that they are pushing their boundaries with in general, right? If you've got somebody who continually pushes boundaries, it's probably that they don't view you as an equal person.
Not necessarily.
Well,
sometimes they just really don't understand. They've heard, for example, that no means yes. And so they're well, I've been told to pursue, so I'm going to keep pushing, right? And we need to be hey, flirting class, don't do that. Somebody says no, you should listen.
That could certainly be the case, but I think also there's a lot of the other case as well. And I don't know how that would get fixed in a class like that.
Can we all agree to quit this thing that women will sometimes do? They will say no, obviously wanting you to ask again. This has happened more than once.
That's just bullshit. That's absolute bullshit. And that's why I'm always saying explicitness I think is actually a really good thing, because when I say no, it means no. Leave me the fuck alone.
The clearest story on this that I have for you, gang, and since this is some Wick lore, is when I was much younger, right? And I was at the peak of my game. And I was making out with a woman, and she was oh no, I don't want to go any farther than this. I'm a good girl. And I'm okay. So we didn't. I stopped and we started watching the movie again. And then 2 minutes later, she's good girls like bad boys. And what do I do with that? How do I go? Where do I go from there?
That's some baloney, man. That's some baloney.
That's
and
very
how many
convenient.
times I told
am a wife
there's
beater.
one guy. I told him so many different ways. I have a boyfriend. I'm not interested in this. That's really nice of you, but I'm really not interested. And how many times over months I told this guy to leave me alone, and he would not stop leaving me alone. He would not stop fucking like creeping on me, following me around, and this was at a workplace too. And I don't know how many different ways I could have told him I'm not interested. Please leave me alone. But he still kept fucking doing his thing. And you know what? I don't know if that's like a him problem, but I'm pretty sure that the whole culture around like being coy and saying like no, but I really mean yes is probably contributing to that too. So yeah.
That's awesome. I think that's a fantastic idea. I think that's a fantastic point, Wick. Chat seemed to love it. I think that, again, we've come to a lot of very good conclusions. I really like that we talked about communication and boundaries. I wish we would have talked potentially a little bit more about platonic relationships and romantic relationships and like where this friends into friends with benefits like barrier kind of gets a little bit viscous or permeable. But again, another conversation for another day. This has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you guys all again very much for being here. I'd like to give you all an opportunity to say your goodbyes, give us your final points, make sure that your final message was heard. We started on the bottom before, so let's start at the top. This time we'll go with Katie first.
Yeah, I'm Katie. Is this where we plug ourselves?
By all means, plug away, my dear.
Yeah, it's that Katie though, D-A-T, Katie with 2 E's and that doe, D-O-E. I had fun. This was interesting. I found I wanted to do the demo. So if we're gonna do another one, we should do a demo one. That'll be fun. I want to test some stuff out with Rhizome. That'll be interesting. We'll see how that goes. And I have some interesting ideas there I want to check there. And yeah, I think classes generally at early ages in terms of like emotional regulation, communication are very important. Very much less so on the flirting thing. I just think I think a person first needs to have the insight if they're even interested in flirting before they can be put into a class talking about flirting. And I think we don't increase enough insight in society and children in general for us to be able to have those distinctions. So, yeah.
Again, thank you very much for being here, Katie. You have a fantastic perspective. You are passionate about what you feel, and I wanted your passion here today. And again, thank you for reaching out to me to make sure that I could include your perspective because it is a fantastic perspective. Erudite.
Yeah, my name's Not So Erudite. You can find me under that name anywhere. I don't really know if I have closing statements. Yeah, let's try to improve social scripts around dating so that all lives can be improved. Yeah, I guess I'll end it there.
Thank you again for being here, Not So Erudite, and for helping me to organize a lot of this. Behind all of this, Erudite was a huge assistance, not only with this, but in general with kind of getting my channel to where it is and trying to figure out what I'm doing just generally. Thank you for being you, Not So Erudite. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing with us and for trying to educate us all a little bit more on this. Rhizome.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed the conversation. Somebody, what's your bird's name?
I have 2 birds, actually. One of them is Icarus. The other one is Sherbert. Icarus is 5 and Sherbert is only 1.
I think we can all learn a big lesson from them. I'm Rhizome on Twitch. Thanks for having me.
Rhizome, it was a pleasure meeting you. I look forward to having more conversations with you in the future. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be with us today. It was fantastic hearing from you.
For sure, yeah.
Stardust.
Hi, I'm Stardust. I'm eating 8 pounds of bologna sandwich meat tonight, and I hope my motor function shut down. I'm Stardust. You can find me at Stardust on Twitch or youtube.com/c/Stardust streams. Yeah, just cool stuff, guys.
Stardust, thank you for being here. Always entertaining having a chat with you. I don't know that there's anything that you're not extremely passionate about, at least that you're willing to talk about. And again, that's why I always enjoy my conversations with you, because I can guarantee that it's going to get entertaining for some reason somewhere along the road somehow, and I can never figure out how until it gets there. But thank you for being here today. And I look forward to talking to you again.
Yeah.
Tink, you're next.
All right. So I'm Tink. I'm not a streamer, but I'm a very active mod on Kyla's server. It's not so erudite. I know her as almost exclusively Kyla. But yeah, I enjoyed the conversation. I'm also really good at flirting. So if you come into the chat, I will flirt with you.
I learned everything that I know from you, Tink, and I have so much more to learn yet. Don't reveal too much, or else everybody's going to know where I spend my time hanging out. But thank you so much for joining us. We will turn you into a streamer one day, or reveal your stream to everyone else finally one day. But either way, thank you again for being here, sharing your perspective, and being so bold to come out and join us. Wick!
Happy to do it.
Wick indeed. Twitch.tv/Death of Certainty is where you can find me. If you love my takes, if you hate my takes, you can argue with me, and I'll, give you time. I'll give you a space to have your voice heard, whether I agree with it or not. I was paid money to flirt with everyone on this panel, so God damn it, I'm going to do it as my closing statement here. So I just wanted to start off by saying, somebody online, your aesthetic is super wholesome. Like, just every time I tune in and we have a conversation, your smile, your mannerisms just really get my motor running, if you know what I mean. And you've been a great host today. That turns me on. Stardust, that bologna.
I'm eating bologna meat tonight, and I hope I die.
Imagining that, picturing you scarfing down 8 pounds of bologna meat, just I can't. Words cannot describe how that makes me feel.
I hope I die.
And that living on the edge, that's what I want here. Like that's what draws me to you. Your life on the edge. Tink, you are the best Princess Jasmine I've ever had. And when we sang together on Kyla's server, it was majestic. And look, I am super attracted to talent, and you are a talented singer, and that was amazing. I really enjoed that.
I heard Stardust is too.
Karaoke again.
Oh, we do have to do
Stardust. Are you a good singer too?
I like Stardust, yes. Rhizome, I haven't heard you sing, but I've heard you speak, and the sultry tones of your voice just, it gives me chills every time. Like you're very huggable. And I think that, that's a good thing. You make me feel comfortable when I'm around you. And I just want you to hold me in your arms and tell me everything's going to be all right. Erudite, like, intelligence is my favorite quality, and you have it in spades. Oh, my God. It's just the first time I heard you speak, the first time I heard you go off on a rant on something, it was like, preach it, sister, preach it. And
first time you saw my legs.
Yeah, that turns me on to no end. I'm not even kidding right now. And Katie.
No. I'm setting boundaries. I'm uncomfortable.
Okay, if you're uncomfortable, we will just end it there. Katie. So yeah, thank you.
Wait, can I say one last thing? I'm so sorry to do this. I know this is the most obnoxious shit. Okay, I was trying to think about why I was so enraged when everyone was so calm through the whole panel. So first of all, I'm sorry for being so enraged. Second of all, I know why it is. This topic of flirting and dating and relationships and overall gender sexual engagement is probably one of the things I'm most passionate about talking about in this space. And I think we do a bad job talking about it. And that's why I was feeling so frustrated, to be honest. Yeah, just so it's clear, I do love you guys, though.
I totally get it, and you know what? I feel like I went very nihilistic with my rage about it, rather than very direct. So, but yeah, I think we could have a second conversation, maybe one-on-one, that might be good or something, because I think there's more nuance to the reasons why people cross boundaries and continue to cross them, so and stuff like that.
Again, thank you guys so much for being here, Erudite. That's exactly why I wanted to have this conversation today. I feel like this is something that everybody is very heavily invested in, with a large proportion of their mental energy all the time in some way or another, but nobody's really talking about this. Nobody is helping anyone else figure out how any of these things work. And again, that's where I was like, maybe there should be a class. And at least we figured out that if there is a class, Wick should be the one teaching it. I've got to step my game up a little bit and figure out how to do this a little bit. I was paid to say this, but I feel it deep down in my soul. Fuck Wick. God damn it. I need to be the flirt king around here. Or at least be a little bit smarter than I am.
See, I like the explicit bluntness. That really gets me going, so thank you.
Again, thank you guys all so very much for being here. I look forward to having future conversations. Next week, we are going to be talking about controlled substances, what things are drugs, what things shouldn't be considered drugs, what things the government should be telling people to take, what things the government should be telling people not to take, and where ethically all of this ridiculous stuff lies. We're putting together another panel for a week or two from now about democracies and the differences between them in different places. If you guys are interested in joining us on any future panels, remember to join my Discord, get the panelist role from the roles thingy-mabobber, and stay in touch with me. Let me know that you want to participate, and I will try to include you into these conversations, and we will have many big future conversations. Everyone, again, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to continue chatting with folks for a little bit, but then I'm going to raid out of here, so if you guys are streaming, keep streaming, and maybe I'll
whole
send it
panel.
to you.
I'm going to keep chatting about dating with my husband's going to come in and Tink. So if you guys are just invited. I just don't want to like have an after panel and be like, you guys, fuck you. You're not invited. So you're all invited if you'd like to join. Just let me know. DM me.
I
guys.
heard too much about bloody nipples tonight. It was horrible. I'm in pain.
You're welcome.
Oh.
I had fun. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you, Katie.
Bye.
Yeah, I'm.
Oh, you're muted.
You're wicking out.
Yeah, Wick left.
Hey, Wick.
No, I'm still here. I was just talking to my audience and.
Oh.
Wick, could you tell me about your Discord real quick? I'm sorry, I just saw a DM about something.
No, that's like if you're not comfortable with me plugging it, I've just been trying to plug my Discord recently. So if you guys want to see my Discord, it's it has its ebbs and flows, but it's usually got a lot of people chatting in it. So you can come to my Twitch site, just click on the Discord link there, and it'll take you there. That's all.
All right, guys.
Have a good night. I'm gonna go crash.
Have a good one.
See you guys.
Bye.
All right, folks. Thank you guys all so much for being here. I'm going to take just a little short break. I've got a couple of things that I need to do, but I think that I'm going to jump into that conversation with Erudite here in a second, if they are willing to have me, because frankly, Nick is fantastic, Tink is incredibly intelligent, and I'd love to talk more about this and actually be able to share my thoughts in all of this. So let me go take a short little break, maybe 10, 15 minutes. Don't go too far away. I'll be right here, okay, guys? You hang out too. I'll see you real soon, I promise. All right. Well, guys, what'd you think? I had fun. I hope you did too. Man, oh man, that was flipping great in my personal, professional opinion. Had all of those folks there. We're going to have Not So Erudite get in contact with us shortly here, and we're going to try to continue the conversation. Hopefully I can be a little bit more involved in it. I thought this was very interesting. I liked talking about the different things. My personal opinion on a lot of this stuff is that the person that is doing the flirting has one idea of what is appropriate and what is acceptable and what they think that they're trying to do, and the person that is being flirted with oftentimes has a very different perception, or actually 100% of the time has a different perception. Sometimes those perceptions are relatively similar and they can have a mutual understanding. Sometimes there's a bit more of a difference in the understanding, and then this creates the tension. So when one person thinks that it's okay and the other person thinks that this is extremely inappropriate or this is extremely lame, and again, there's a spectrum that goes on here where inappropriate is on one side and lame is on the other side, and somewhere in the middle is what is sexy. And you're trying to balance this in between it. And what is sexy for one individual is not what is sexy for another individual. And so both of these two people need to find somewhere where the sexiness aligns somehow. Again, I should have had gauges and graphics and all sorts of things so that I could show people. But again, there's a spectrum that goes back and forth. Where on one side, you have oh my gosh, this is awesome. And on the other side, you have, oh my gosh, this is super lame. Or no, not awesome. On one side, you have, oh my gosh, this is terrible because this is way too much. And on the other side, you have, oh, this is awful because this is way too little. And somewhere in the middle is the balance that everybody needs to try to find. Right. Well, I hope that Kyla comes back to me. Shelly, how are you, friend? Where are you at? Do you want to chat with me real quick? I need to kill some time before Kyla joins me. Do you want to chit-chat? I'm over at my Discord if you want to come and hang out. I think you're a member there. I'm not sure. If you are, join the show waiting room, and I will drag you into the chit-chat, and we will have a talk. What are you up to over there? Are you streaming now? Are you live? You don't appear to be live.
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes. So sports, right? Sports etiquette is so different from the way that we would interact otherwise. So like this'll be very specific. I'll give like an example from back when I played like soccer, like back in like middle school, right? So part of the socialization,
chat,
I'm not
guys.
saying this was good or bad. After the game, you would not only like high five, but you could bring the hand back and then slap the person that you just high fived's ass, right? That was just part of it. It was like, right?
And if you're really close, as a joke, you get a little extra, and it's funny.
And you'd
right?
grab and you'd squeeze,
Context.
right?
Yeah. But
If there's a term
you wouldn't
we
do
use
that
for
to
it-
someone on the other team ever.
Exactly.
Probably.
There's a term we use for it. It's called good gaming someone. You know. So,
There you go.
So I just good
Mhm.
gamed them. You know.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I'm curious to have somebody in Wick's thought on this as well. So this was something I was trying to figure out. Is in the conversation, it felt like what. I want to be careful. So I'm going to say this in a way, and it might not be the most palatable, but give it the best, most charitable interpretation, because I'm literally not trying to be a dick. I'm just like struggling to find the right words to explain what like I'm trying to figure out. So there was this issue that it felt like I was having, like including with you, Wick, where it felt like I was like, this is obvious, like descriptive reality of broadly the society that we live in. And it felt like there was a lot of disagreement about that. And I was just like, I literally cannot understand how we can't agree about this, other than like sometimes with like, for example, like with Katie, I'm like, well, I know that she lives in Israel, so like that we literally might be living in different descriptive realities, right? But when we're talking about like certain norms, like how some people can be better at like flirting, I'm like, I feel like this is like self-evident, like literally self-evident. And I get stuck, like I don't know how to contend when there's a separate
my pushback on this was that, at least from what I heard, and this might not be what you intended to say. Oh, can she still hear me? Or
Yeah.
okay. And again, this might not be what you intended to say, but what I heard is that there was an objectively right way to flirt. There's an objectively way that would work across the board, and that's what I objected to, right? Because I would say that no, like I would push back against that. Like, I think that we cannot. It'd be very hard, because even within a social norm group, there are so many different tastes, and to try to argue or teach a class on one objective way to flirt better, quote unquote. I mean, there are general guidelines, sure, I would agree with that, right? But at the end of the day, the best general guideline I could give to someone is find out what your partner or your intended recipient of the flirting enjoys, and then do that, right? Like, that's the most effective way I've found. Find out what they like, and then do that. Appeal to them, to their taste.
Can I ask two questions?
Yeah, go for it.
So I have two questions.
Get closer to the mic, though.
I have two questions. Question one is, so then if that's the case, is there an objective right way to flirt with every individual person in every individual circumstance? So atomistically or relativistically speaking, there is an objectively right way or even an objectively best way to flirt.
Yeah, but that best way changes based on the context of the situation in such a way that it'd be hard. It would be hard to teach this in a class, right? It would be hard to give a script, as you would say.
So wouldn't it be simple that the lesson in the class would be to teach people how to do their best to understand what other people enjoy out of flirting?
Well, that's why I initially said that if you're good at communication, you're largely going to be successful, because part of being a successful communicator is learning how to speak to one's audience.
So
and
do
how
we think
to
that
help them
every
understand.
good communicator is good at flirting?
Of course not. Of course not.
Okay, well then that's just not true.
Wait, so
it doesn't have to be 100% like 1-to-1 ratio to still be an effective way to teach someone. Like, it doesn't have to work every time, right? Because you cannot give me a prescription that will work every time in flirting.
Yeah, but so then this isn't a criticism of the previous, right? It's a non sequitur, right? So like, just because.
Okay. Well, a non sequitur would be saying that someone says just be yourself, which no one on that panel did, right? Like, no one on that panel said just be yourself. That advice was never given on this panel.
Well, so the advice was flirt the way you like to flirt. Do you not see how that's almost a one-to-one with
that was
yourself?
almost Stardust's exact take, right?
It's still different. She wasn't saying that would be successful necessarily. She wasn't giving it as a thing. This is how you be a better flirt. She's just saying you should flirt how you want to for your own self, which may be super ineffective, right? Like, we could acknowledge that, like, it might not, like, you might be very bad at it if that's the way you go about it.
Yeah, but nobody said that anybody was saying that the way to be the best flirter, or that the way to be the most effective flirter is exclusively to be yourself. It's just that people said, like, the only advice is be yourself, which is flirt the way you enjoy to flirt. And it wasn't just said by Stardust; it was said a whole bunch of times, basically.
That was the one that I would like. That was the most clear to me, because she said specifically, so like, I flirt in the way that works for me, right?
Yeah. What I'm trying to get down to the bottom of is, where did all this strange quibbling come from?
Yeah,
because it seems to be the case that people kept taking away these very strange takeaways, right? So, an example, like what you said originally, which is that, like, well, it seemed like you were saying objectively there is one best way to flirt, and we will just teach everyone this best way. As in to say, it's like, like, say the best way to flirt is to use exclusively big words and talk very fast or something like that. But it's like, I think we can probably agree that no one on the panel would be stupid enough to think that would be the case.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, go ahead, Wick, you respond.
No, it's fine. My response is, like, it seems to me, and I love you both to death, right? But it seems to me that you're holding yourselves to us or me to a standard that you aren't holding yourself to in this case. Like, you're holding yourself or me to a standard where I have to meet exactly. But words were said like things like good or bad flirting, sophisticated versus unsophisticated, things like that, which again is fine. And I would say relativistically you can say this was good or this was bad, but it would be entirely contextual on the situation, right? It would be entirely dependent on the situation. So my quibble here is I felt like it was trying to be applied over a larger audience or a broader scope than I felt was helpful. And in fact, I think trying to apply certain scripts to a larger scope would in fact have the opposite effect and be less helpful.
I don't think that anyone's trying to like apply a script. So I'm going to make a comparison that's going to tap into like my roots as like, so I was like a lit major, right? So if we describe this term in terms of like, okay, being a pickup artist, because if Barely is watching this is for you, buddy, right? So we can say that historically pieces of art have been noted because of people's specific style and their ability to use the structures of language that we have in a way that was like adaptive, like very impressive and complex, and has like withstood the test of time and people's ability to understand it and appreciate and enjoy it, right? So flirting is a lot like writing in this case. It's almost exactly like writing, right? So we can describe some basic fundamental rules that are in place, and then everyone can apply their specific writing style to it, right? So like rules in this case, like instead of like periods at the end of a sentence, if you're going to engage in like flirting, we're going to have to say, okay, these are important points. So like, okay, you're going to need to get consent before you continue to this step in the flirting process, right? That would be like a comma in this case. So we can establish some sort of markers to where people are doing this, but they understand, okay, this is like some basic flirting structures, and this is how we can like use these different structures to make something that is applicable to just about everyone, but can be unique to us, right?
Yeah, I think that there is an interesting correlation to be made between like this, for example, and trying to teach a music class. Like when you're trying to teach someone to be a good musician, we can teach them, okay, well, in Western style music, this is what we call the 10 or the 12 tonal scale. This is the way that music is composed. These are the rules that you have to follow if you're trying to write a Beethoven song. But then when we're making rock and roll, like the rule is you have to break the rules, but you have to break the rules in the right way so that it's appropriate and we're like doing the right thing. And that's not to say that it's impossible to teach classes on how to do rock and roll. It's just we teach the framework of this is how music works. These are how all of the individual parts function. These are the way that all of the tools are used. Now go and use these tools appropriately, but don't break too many of the rules at once or else you're going to do a faux pas.
Yeah. Like essentially we can extrapolate this principle onto like any art form, right?
And just like most techniques in general, where there's an observer, negotiation would be one. Any sort of like you said, an art medium, comedy. Comedy is another great one. It's like you can be really funny to one group and to one crowd and not to another, right? It's when you teach someone to be good at comedy, you're not telling them jokes, right? You're not giving them a list of jokes. You're telling them how to cultivate that which a crowd will feel enthused by.
And these things, like, I don't disagree with any singular point here, right? What I do disagree with, I think, is this idea that this is the one true way. And that's what it feels like. It feels like it's the one true way. And if we can just do this, all people will be successful and all flirting. It just feels so...
I don't think anyone said that, though. Any of that.
It's what is being implied, right?
I don't think so.
That there's this standard framework that if you follow it, you will improve your flirting. Is that not what you were saying?
Well, so those are two different lines, right? So that there is an idea, a framework that can almost always be used to improve your framework. That's different from there's an objective way to always flirt, right? Those are two different things.
It's a distinction without a difference, right?
Like, it's a huge difference, right? Yeah. There's a huge difference between a structure, right? We have structures for all sorts of social engagement, like structures for how to set boundaries, and then within that people can operate very differently and apply it in ways that work. It's going to look both subjective and objective to some extent, and objective only as far as it applies to like objectively within the social norms operating would be our society, which we can call objective because it's as objective as humanity basically seems to get, unless we're going into like physics, but nobody's talking about physics. We're talking about social human interactions.
Yeah. Or if we were to use like a really simple like hypothetical as the comparison here, it's like if we looked at martial arts, right? There's no objective one best way to fight, right? But anyone can improve their ability to fight by doing a martial art. However, that doesn't mean that just because you learn a martial art, you will beat someone else that hasn't learned a martial art. Like if someone has like way greater physical capabilities than you or something like that, it might be the case that almost no level of training will allow you to beat them, right? So that's where the difference is, right? The difference is like there's a framework that can make you better versus there's only one way to do things. They're very different. It's not whatever without a difference, like you said.
A distinction without a
distinction without a difference, yeah.
And again, this only gets you so far, right? Like this only gets you so far, knowing this framework and things like that. And a lot of the best athletes, a lot of the best authors, a lot of the best, and almost any musicians, any other kind of art kind of skill that you can look at, in athletics as well, are people who purposely break the rules. Like, practice makes perfect when you have perfect practice. And you can be trained to have very bad habits. And one of my concerns here is that when we provide these frameworks, because social norms differ so wildly when it comes to regions, when it comes to cultures, even within America, right? Like, even within the United States, like the culture of someone who was raised a Mormon in Utah is going to be a lot different than someone who is raised in, for example, Florida and is a Baptist, right? They're going to have very different social norm frameworks that they operate on. So when we use these frameworks and try to apply these frameworks, and we go into these different cultures, you're gonna run into obstacles, and you're not gonna understand why.
Yeah, I guess this is where I'm getting confused again, because it's like, so it seems like you're somehow talking past me, because I agree with you that, like, so what you're saying is an argument against staunch adherence to orthodox. True, but that's not an argument against orthodoxy.
Well,
Bryce Live's wondering if he can join us. Everyone.
Oh, sure. Okay.
Yeah, like just simply like staunch adherence to orthodox is a problem is not an argument to like abolish orthodoxy.
Well,
not that we need orthodoxy.
I'm not asking for, like, I don't think we have an orthodoxy, right? Like, I don't think there is an orthodoxy. I mean, that's what we're advocating for here, or some of us are advocating for, is a more standardized orthodox approach. Is that not true?
I wouldn't say standardized. I would say like socialized or normal.
So
well, we already do have an orthodox. Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to mention this when Nick used his martial arts metaphor before, because I thought it was an extremely apt metaphor, and I love martial arts. So there is like only one proper way to fight another person and win. You have to punch them more than they punch you, and you have to do this thing. But there's a million different martial arts that you could go and take to learn how to do this. They're all going to teach you essentially the same thing, which is to punch them more frequently than they punch you. But like, they're going to teach you with different frameworks. They're all trying to teach you the same thing, but they're not going to teach you the same thing at any of these things. And it's impossible to say which one of these methods, techniques, or frameworks is the best one or the right one. It's more a question of how do you use the frameworks that you're being taught? How do you understand these frameworks so that you can adapt them to whatever specific unique situation you find yourself in?
You know,
You
I feel
need
like
to
this
understand the structure in
Sorry.
order to know how to break it effectively.
to me, as like an outside observer, like listening to the conversation, I didn't get the entirety of the panel, but I really feel like this is just kind of like too much over intellectualizing. I think that you can break it down really simply. You teach people how to read nonverbal cues and like body language, and just like listen better, and tell them to trial and error, right? Like, don't feel entitled. Teach people how to handle like rejection better. Being declined or rejected is okay, and it sucks, but like there's nothing really like tethered to it. And I think if you achieve these like main things, we'll have like a great result. Also, Tink said something at the start that I agree with. Like, negging is based, and I hate how people, especially progressive people, try to frame it as like this horrible manipulative thing, because like
The
across our
funnest. It's the funnest way to flirt.
So fun.
But yeah, it's just that thing, right? That it's like, because pickup artists are bad broadly, anything that pickup artists do is bad, which is just like brain rot. Like, it's just like, the reality is like lots of
Shout
pickup
out,
artists have
Barry.
lots of
I love
success,
you, buddy.
and that's for a reason. Like,
yeah, so there's like this idea, because it's something I see all the time, and I'm really trying to like hammer it home in a bunch of people's idea, like that whole like contagion heuristic, or like the law of contagion, right? That when some idea or person or movement has something associated with it, that it's somehow like tainted, right? Like, people won't buy Hitler's sweater because Hitler wore it, right? Obviously, that's a super like extreme example, but it's exactly what you're saying. Like, because yeah, exactly, the fucking polo, my really aesthetic, like nice, like clean, form-fitting polo. Like, fuck.
sorry, pal, makes you look like a proud boy. You gotta burn it. It's that's all there is to it.
Well, listen, maybe we need to reject modernity and return to tradition, and just start like, wait, maybe I shouldn't say that.
Return to monkey is my primary
if I could
maxim.
understand, maybe, I feel like Wick, I could be wrong. This is now my best guess. I feel like part of our quibble is that what you're hearing is like a specific prescription, whereas what we're talking about is like some level of like description of reality, and then I guess there is a level of prescription because I'm saying like, let's create these frameworks. I guess in my view, it's not prescriptive because I think these frameworks already exist. I think what we want to do is describe them tangibly and well, and then give people little good cues and rules for them to operate within these frameworks that already exist and know how to work within them. So it's actually not. I'm just trying to understand. Do you feel like I'm trying to prescribe to people like a new venue?
That's how it 100% came off during the panel, especially when Tink specifically would use words like "we need a better script for this," right? That these are the terms you used. That we need a better script for how people operate when it comes to flirting and things like that. You did use that term, and so when you use terms like that, I definitely think prescriptions like. That's what a script is. It's a prescriptive set of steps in order to get to a point, whether it be a dialogue tree, whether it be all sorts of different ways of doing a script here. So and again, like when we talk about communication versus specifically flirting, which I think flirting is a subset of communication. Like I do not think these are separate things. Like I think it's a subset of the larger grouping of communication, and we already have communication classes, and honestly they do very well to help people improve in their flirting potential.
But what if you specifically want to work on flirtation, right? So this is something that was like really annoying me with like Katie, is she kept being like, well, essentially what she was saying was like, well, why would we have flirting classes? We don't even have communication classes. And it's like, just because we don't have one doesn't mean we can't have the other. Negotiation is something that you can specify yourself into without wanting to become a master of all forms of communication. You can specify.
Folks, if you guys are still here, I'm going to send you over to Erudite's chat so that you guys can interact with her over there. I'm just going to end my stream. I've had a wonderful time with this so far, and we will clip this down and I will grab what I need to elsewhere when I need to. Thank you again, guys, for being so awesome.